At least on the surface, who dared to challenge a heaven-grade alchemist? Wen Yijian was slightly surprised, and said to Ling Han, "You're still some master? Don't be scared when I say it." Ling Han smiled faintly. "Haha, what master can scare me?" Wen Yijian said disdainfully, "You're at most a high-level black-grade alchemist, although for your age this is already very impressive." Ha 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 ha. Everyone instantly laughed loudly. Wen Yijian was baffled by the laughter, and said darkly, "Is what I said that funny? Idiot, my family's young master Han is a heaven-grade alchemist." Zhu Wujiu shouted. Ha 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 ha. This time it was Wen Yijian's turn to laugh loudly, almost tearing up from laughing. Wasn't this funny? Who didn't know that there were only 2 heaven-grade alchemists in the entire vast lands? But these 2 had diligently studied alchemy for who knew how many years, so how could they be this immature youngster in front of him? But after he laughed for a while, he discovered that no one agreed with him, and instead looked at him like an idiot. Apart from a few beauties who still had their usual fanatical gazes. Master Ling is indeed a heaven-grade alchemist, admired by the whole world, an old man said. He was a flower blossom tier elite of the extreme imperial sect, specially escorting the sect's disciples into the mystery realm. That's right, Master Ling is our North region's most outstanding genius, second to none. The Great Compassion Sect's Flower Blossom Tier Elite also said. Greetings, Master Ling. The Flower Blossom Tier Elites present all cupped their hands in salute to Ling Han. Alchemy and martial arts weren't in the same domain, but were inextricably linked. If it weren't for Ling Han's cultivation being too low, these Flower Blossom Tier Elites would all have to kneel in salute. Ling Han only raised his hand, appearing calm and collected. He'd seen this kind of scene many times in his previous life, so he obviously wouldn't be flustered. Wen Yijian was greatly shocked. A flower blossom tier might be muddled, but it was impossible for over 100 flower blossom tier elites to all have a seizure. Hiss, this youngster in front of him was really a heaven-grade alchemist? Holy shit, this was too young, right? Alchemists had an aloof status, and even if you didn't ask for an alchemist's help, you definitely couldn't offend them. Because offending an alchemist, especially a high-level alchemist, many people would volunteer to stick up for the alchemist without the alchemist even having to say anything. If the matter of him, Wen Yijian, looking down on a heaven-grade alchemist was spread, would there still be a place for him in the entire vast lands? Wen Yijian was proud but definitely not stupid, so he immediately lowered his proud head and said, "I didn't know, Master Ling, please forgive me." Master Ling. Ling Han smiled and said, "Actually, I'm not some heaven-grade alchemist, just a small martial artist." "Didn't you want to teach me a lesson? Come, 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 let's fight to our heart's content." "Fight your sister, do you think I'm stupid?" How could Wen Yijian believe that over 100 flower blossom tier elites cooperating with a small spiritual pedestal tier like Ling Han to put on a show? Was that possible? He laughed loudly and said, "Master Ling really knows how to joke." He was also an extremely slick person, and wasn't troubled by Ling Han's words in the slightest. "Wen Yijian, come fight." Shen Zhongcheng was full of fighting spirit. He was also a sword user, and couldn't help but want to spar with the sword arts expert. Wen Yijian just kicked an iron plate and lost a lot of face, so he obviously wanted to regain his face. He immediately snorted and said, "Since you want to lose so much, I'll let you have it all." Chapter 463. If it was only a flower blossom tier or spiritual pedestal tier medicinal valley, Ling Han wouldn't be interested. He'd soon cross the flower blossom tier and advance into the spiritual infant tier. I'm not sure about the specifics. There's a spiritual infant tier beast keeping watch at the valley entrance, so I don't dare to go deep, but I also discovered a spirit fruit tree at the valley entrance, Qin Lianyu said. It's also because of this medicinal valley that I ran into Hu Qing Fang. I see. Ling Han murmured. There was a 7th tier spirit fruit tree at the valley entrance, so there might be even higher level spirit medicines in the valley. Even if they were only 7th tier spirit medicines, they were still quite useful. Brother Ling, are you moved? Qin Lianyu said with a smile. Are you showing off now? Ling Han asked. Follow me. Qin Lianyu didn't take the opportunity to push him, and instead led the way in front while talking about how she discovered the medicinal valley. Because there was still half a year before the Restore Heaven Academy officially opened, she wasn't in a hurry, and wandered around along the way, still wanting to find her own fated chance. And she was really lucky. When she was tracking a big white rabbit, she came to that medicinal valley. However, there were spiritual infant-tier beasts roaming about, frightening her. She was just about to find someone to join forces and barge in, but unexpectedly encountered Hu Qingfang. She was then chased by the latter, and tangled with him for more than half a month. So they were still quite far from that medicinal valley. When Qin Lianyu ran, she obviously took many detours, but they didn't have to go to the medicinal valley. They only needed to walk in a straight line, so it was about a 5-day journey. A day later, they arrived at a small town, and stopped to rest for the night. Lady Qin. Lady Qin. Early in the morning the next day, they were just about to set out when they saw a young man chasing after them. He looked to be about 26 or 27, and was actually already at the peak stage of the flower blossom tier. His strength was rather impressive. His appearance was also very impressive. He wore a cyan outfit, completely outlining his slender and fit figure. His hair was jet black as if it could give off light, and his skin was sparkling, smoother than many women's. Yirong. Qin Lianyu revealed a surprised expression, and said, "Why have you come? I heard that Lady Qin was entangled by that evil thief Hu Qingfang, so I immediately rushed over. Fortunately I came in time." The cyan-clothed man heaved a great sigh of relief, as if relieved of a heavy burden, and there was obvious adoration in his eyes. Qin Lianyu acted as if she didn't see it, and said, "This is Flying Star Sect Master's beloved disciple, Yi Rong Brother Yi. Brother Ye's martial arts talent is extremely high, and obtained the direct qualification to enter the Restore Heaven Academy." Yi Rong immediately revealed a proud expression, and put his hands behind his back, appearing extremely insufferably arrogant. Being able to obtain the direct qualification to enter the Restore Heaven Academy proved that his talent was indeed extremely awesome. Such a genius obviously held his own pride, and was polite to Qin Lianyu because he liked this woman. In front of others, he naturally revealed the arrogance that geniuses usually had. As the saying went, birds of a feather flocked together. A genius like him obviously disdained to be in the company of Ling Han and the others. Ling Han only smiled and said, "So it's Brother Yi." Seeing Ling Han greet him, Can Yi Zhuxian air, and He Lan Yun also greeted him one after another. Hu Niu, however, didn't bother to pay attention to such a cocky guy. Yi Rong took everyone's greetings as a matter of course. Being able to obtain the direct qualification to enter the Restore Heaven Academy already sufficiently affirmed his talent, and was the capital for his pride. He was completely condescending, and only looked at Qin Lianyu and said, "Lady Qin, it's better if I escort you to the Restore Heaven Academy." Qin Lianyu was displeased and said, "Brother Yi, do you think I'm a 3-year-old child? I'm just concerned about you." Yi Rong didn't take it seriously. However, if these words were said by someone else, he'd definitely fly into a rage, and it was even possible that he'd directly kill the other party. An exceptional genius. How could he be insulted lightly? Qin Lianyu looked at Ling Han with an inquiring gaze, because they were going to the medicinal valley next. If there was one more person, then after obtaining the treasured medicine, there would obviously be one more person to distribute it to. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "Since Brother Yi is sincere, then let's go together." Yi Rong couldn't help but glance at Ling Han, feeling that this person was a bit perceptive, knowing that he was pursuing Qin Lianyu, and deliberately speaking up for him. And there was no harm in guiding him in the future. He opened his mouth very arrogantly and said, "You guys are all going to the Restore Heaven Academy, right?" After obtaining everyone's affirmation, he laughed mischievously and said, "I'm a direct disciple after all and have certain privileges. In the future, when you guys go to the academy to participate in the exam, I'll put in a few good words for you guys and help you guys." Thank you very much," Ling Han said indifferently. He'd seen too many people who thought themselves infallible, so he didn't take it to heart at all. Zhu Xianair, Qin Lianyu, and the other 2 girls covered their mouths and laughed lightly. If this guy witnessed Ling Han's battle prowess, he probably wouldn't say anything about helping them even if he was beaten to death. Blushing, including Yi Rong, the 7 of them continued forward. Yi Rong certainly had quite a background. The Flying Star sect was a super sect that wasn't inferior to the Wind Moon sect, but couldn't compare to ancient orthodoxies like the Absolute Saber sect and the Heaven Sword sect. This Yirong was the seventh disciple of the Flying Star sect master, and also one of the most outstanding three. Being able to obtain the direct entry qualification to the Restore Heaven Academy was proof. He was currently only 29 years old, and looked 26 or 27 years old. That was because he entered the Flower Blossom tier early, and his appearance changed slowly. Peak stage of the Flower Blossom tier. Battle prowess of 16 stars. Extremely outstanding. Along the way, only he had the right to talk, boasting about his battle achievements, what kind of elites and geniuses he'd once beheaded, insufferably arrogant. However, everyone paid no attention to him, making him often unable to continue the conversation as he spoke, appearing extremely awkward. For days later at night, they passed by a village. Because it wasn't far from the medicinal valley, they wanted to rush there in one go, not thinking of stopping here. However, Ling Han suddenly stopped. "What's wrong?" Zhu Xian'er asked. Yirong was extremely displeased. If it weren't for Qin Lianyu's sake, he wouldn't have dragged these people along, but now Ling Han actually dared to drag them down. It's only just entered night, so why isn't there any fire in this village? Ling Han asked. Maybe they sleep early, Yirong said casually, appearing extremely displeased. A mere mortal village, even if something happened, how could it be worth paying attention to? The typical mentality of a superior. Ling Han ignored him and turned to walk towards the village. Yirong trembled in anger. They actually dared to ignore him, truly despicable. He said, "Ignore him, we..." Before the word "go" left his mouth, he saw that the others had already followed Ling Han, almost making him faint from anger. Were these people possessed? Chapter 464. With Ling Han's heaven-tier vision in his previous life, there were very few people he couldn't see through, but Hunyo was one of them. Unknowingly, the little girl was already in the spiritual pedestal tier. So fast. When Yijian only saw a blur before his eyes, and Hunyo's small fist was already in front of him, giving him no time to parry or dodge. However, he was a genius after all, and with a glare 2 beams of light shot out, piercing towards Hunyo's small hand. Pung, with a sound, the 2 sword beams hit Hunyo's fist. The power wasn't small, and Hunyo's fist was deflected, brushing past his cheek. When Yijian's battle awareness was extremely strong, and once the danger was averted, he immediately counterattacked, turning his index finger into a sword and piercing towards Hunyo. Xiao Hunyo's figure flashed and disappeared again. When Yijian cried out inwardly, and sure enough, there was a gust of wind behind his head as Hunyo threw another punch. He hurriedly leaned his upper body forward, but all his black hair stood up as if turning into sharp swords, piercing towards Hunyo. Pong, with a punch, Hunyo instantly broke several hundred strands of Wen Duo's hair, but drops of blood actually appeared on Hunyo's small hand, which was blasted out by the hair sword. Hunyo was furious and punched repeatedly. When Yijian waved his hair sword to defend while turning around, finally facing Hunyo head-on. He pointed, and instantly 9 flashes of sword chi crisscrossed as the will of martial art spread out, emitting a terrifying, intimidating aura. At this moment, he was awe-inspiring like a sword emperor, making others not dare to look directly at him. Hunyo, however, was unafraid, and turned her fist into a claw, waving towards the sword chi. Pu piu piu piu. The sword chi was completely destroyed by Hunyo, but Hunyo's attack was also ineffective. The two's moves were extremely fast, as if it was a spark from a flint, but every move and style was extremely dangerous. No matter who made the slightest mistake, they would be heavily injured. The surroundings were completely silent, and even breathing couldn't help but be held back. Only after a long while did the sound of coarse breathing resound. Everyone's heart was shaken. It turned out that these 2 people were actually this strong. No matter who went up, they would definitely be hit by Hunyo's attack, and Hunyo's position, facing Wen Yijian's counterattack, would also suffer a merciless backlash. But the other 2 fought to a draw, truly terrifying. Wen Yijian's eyes were wide open. How old was this little girl? She could already stand up to him as an equal. If the 2 of them were the same age, then wouldn't she be able to suppress him with one hand? Hunyo's ferocious nature erupted, and she kept attacking. Her small figure was as fast as lightning, constantly flying, and Wen Yijian could only struggle to parry. However, he was indeed strong, and even in such a situation he had the power to retaliate, giving Hunyo quite a bit of pressure. Ling Han was astonished. This was the first time he had seen Hunyo struggle so much. It wasn't that Hunyo didn't want to use her terrifying teeth to decide the outcome of the battle in one strike, but rather that she didn't have the chance to launch an attack at close range. When Yijian's battle prowess couldn't be underestimated. If Hunyo wanted to bite him, she would definitely be hit by his sword chi. And the result would be hard to say. Hunyo stopped. She took the complete initiative, and the Tonghulu in Wen Yijian's hand was snatched away by her. At this moment, she was peeling off the sugar coating and eating it happily. Ugly, you can take this ugly woman away. Wen Yijian smiled and said, I really underestimated the people of the North region. Little girl, you can be my opponent. 20 years later. I'll wait for your challenge. As he spoke, he turned around and left. Hunyo cried out in anger. How could there be such a dishonest person? They clearly said that if he couldn't beat her, he'd take the ugly woman away, but he left just like that, too hateful. Hunyo is still powerful, actually fighting to a draw with Wen Yijian. He truly interesting. The first on the prodigy roll, Yang Junhao, was defeated in one move, but the third-ranked Hunyo could suppress Wen Yijian. I wonder if Yang Junhao's face is red. Everyone discussed spiritedly. Hunyo didn't disappoint them as expected. The stronger the opponent, the stronger she was, finally preserving the face of the martial artists of the North region. Although there were many people present that could suppress Wen Yijian, if a flower blossom tier warrior was deployed, wouldn't that mean there was no one in the North region? If this flower blossom tier warrior was of the younger generation, then there was no problem. It meant that the martial art of the North region was powerful, but to be suppressed by the older generation, that was simply embarrassing. Ling Han said to Zhu Xian'er, You come with me. The two entered the tent that was set up, blocking everyone's gazes, making everyone's hearts itch. A lone man and woman, would they do some shameful things? The tent was very big. Not only were there tables and chairs, there were even beds. Who asked everyone to not lack spatial rings now, bringing whatever they wanted. Ling Han sat down and said, When did I become your master? Zhu Xian'er bowed down gracefully, and said, Xian'er wants to do something for young Master Han. Ling Han laughed loudly and said, Go to the restaurant as a maid and follow by my side. That's doing things for me. Please instruct me, young Master Han. Xian'er will definitely work hard, Zhu Xian'er said seriously. Ling Han rolled his eyes. When did this woman become so silly and adorable? He shook his head and said, So annoying. He pointed at the table and said, Go lie down there. Zhu Xian'er's pretty face instantly flushed and paled. Could it be that this guy's lust flared and wanted to possess her here? She hurriedly said, Young Master Han, don't misunderstand. Xian'er really wants to do things for you. It's not that I misunderstood, you misunderstood. Ling Han took out a rattan. I hate disobedient people the most, so I'm going to beat you up now. Zhu Xian'er could only obediently walk to the side of the table, lie down and raise her butt. This position caused her pretty face to involuntarily blush. It was so embarrassing. Ling Han laughed mischievously. After whipping her like this woman probably wouldn't pester him anymore, right? Pa, he mercilessly lashed out with the whip, making a crisp sound. However, this was only a normal rattan, so how could it hurt Zhu Xian'er, who was in the spiritual pedestal tier? Pa sounds did not stop, and Zhu Xian'er's pretty face became redder and redder, hotter and hotter. She seemed to understand something and couldn't help but squirm. She could imagine her current appearance. Her full little butt should be facing Ling Han, right? Too embarrassing, too shameful. Her consciousness was a bit blurry, and she only felt that her pretty face was shockingly hot, as if it was about to burn. There was also a feeling that she had never felt before growing inside her body, spreading and rising. Just as she was in a daze, she heard Hunyo say, Ling Han, you're too lenient, let Nyo help you. She hadn't come back to her senses when she felt a piercing pain coming from her butt, causing her to involuntarily cry out in surprise. She suddenly turned around, only to see that Hunyo had bitten her butt. Ow! Chapter 465. What's going on? What's going on? Outside, everyone was incomparably anxious, climbing up and down, about to go crazy. Just now they heard pa-pa-pa sounds, and now there was such a soul-stirring scream. What exactly happened inside? It was hard not to think otherwise. If not for fear of the might of a heaven-grade alchemist, someone would definitely have rushed into the tent to see what was going on. After a while, the tent was opened and Zhu Xian'er walked out, but she didn't take 2 steps before she stretched her hand to her but as if she was injured. Looking at the way she walked, it was obvious that she was limping. It's over, their goddess was ruined. Beast! Ling Han found it strange. The 12 heaven mystery realms originally belonged to the North region. So why did an East region prodigy come? As the days approached, more and more people came to the valley. For example, the Winter Moon sect, the Beast Emperor sect, and so on, they all came in groups of several dozen people. For a large sect like the Winter Moon sect, they had several dozen entry quotas, and for weaker sects like the Great Compassion sect and the Cold Water sect, they had a few to a dozen quotas. However, only these sect-level forces had the right to obtain the quotas, or colossi like the Alchemist Society and the Spirit Treasures Pavilion. Unfortunately, the Alchemist Society didn't care at all, and the Spirit Treasures Pavilion gave all the quotas to the people on the prodigy roll. When the Winter Moon sect arrived, Ling Han reached Feng Yan. Almost a year had passed, and he also advanced into the spiritual pedestal tier, reaching the 2nd layer of the spiritual pedestal tier. The speed of his improvement was a bit shocking. His bloodline was completely activated. The wild strength berserk ape was a shattering void tier existence in ancient times, and after the awakening of his bloodline, it had great benefits for the improvement of his martial art. On top of that, he had a spiritual infant tier master who could obtain countless resources for him. Before the flower blossom tier, it was acceptable no matter how fast one improved, but after the flower blossom tier, it would be truly frightening. Feng Yan had also arrived at Ling Han's side, and an incredibly complicated expression appeared in his eyes. However, it immediately became determined, and his killing intent was boiling. He obviously knew that Ling Han had already become a heaven-grade alchemist, and normally speaking, he would not have the chance to take revenge in this lifetime. But Ling Han's rise was too fast, and he had not gathered the power that a heaven-grade alchemist should have by his side, so he still had a chance. Who would know if they killed him secretly, especially in the mystic realm? This guy didn't participate in the prodigy tournament? Ling Han nodded internally. Feng Yan must have been at a crucial stage of his cultivation at that time. It was possible that he was trying to break through to the spiritual pedestal tier, which was why he did not make it in time. Everyone came to pay their respects to Ling Han. As a dignified heaven-grade alchemist, he could be said to be the figure with the highest status in the North region at present. Even if the leaders of the 3 sects of the valley came, they would also have to be respectful in front of Ling Han. However, this was the North region, and the strongest cultivators were in the spiritual infant tier. It was very difficult for even stronger cultivators to come over. Thus, for spiritual infant tier cultivators, whether Ling Han was a heaven-grade alchemist or an earth-grade mid-level alchemist, there wasn't much of a difference. As the saying went, when there was no tiger in the mountain, the monkey would be king. The North region was just like that. Spiritual infant tier warriors were the strongest in martial art, just like the shattering void tier warriors in the middle state, so there was naturally no need to fear a heaven-grade alchemist. Of course, if there were a few heaven tier and deity transformation tier elites by Ling Han's side, then the situation would naturally be different. Although the fog in Wugu Valley had already dispersed, no one dared to enter. It was said that before the mystic realm officially opened, there was great inauspiciousness in the valley where the fog had dispersed. Those who entered would most likely encounter a bloody disaster, so everyone would rather stay outside for a while longer. When the 1-month period was up, everyone entered the valley one after another. The great forces of the North region jointly controlled this mystic realm, and without an entry quota issued by them, no one could enter. On the way, Ling Han took Guang Yuan and Li Xichan on another path. When the time came, he would put the two into the Black Tower and directly enter the mystic realm with the secret key. However, he didn't want to become the target of public criticism. The inheritance of the 12 palaces was too shocking, and even Flower Blossom and spiritual infant tier warriors would make a move regardless of his identity as a heaven-grade alchemist. Besides, in order to fight for opportunities in the historical site, there was no need to give face to anyone. At worst, he wouldn't be killed, and if he could be silenced, so what if he was killed? This time there were indeed a few flower blossom tier warriors that entered, such as Aofeng of the Winter Moon sect. A flower blossom tier warrior under 50 years old could definitely be classified as young, meeting the entry requirements of the 12 heaven mystic realms. Besides, the Beast Emperor sect, Blood Flame Valley, and the others also had such geniuses, all ranked at the top of the prodigy roll over 20 years ago, so they broke through to the flower blossom tier early. Otherwise, breaking through in their 80s was very normal. There were flower blossom tier warriors, so Ling Han decided to keep a low profile. Lu Yutong, Ken Yi, and the others took Zhu Xian'er with them and first went to the entrance of the mystic realm at the bottom of the valley. Meanwhile, Ling Han, Guang Yuan, and Li Sichuan came to the dense forest in the valley. There was no one around, so he put the two into the Black Tower and took out the key to the Sagittarius Palace. Wang, the key immediately lit up, as if it had established a connection with some power in the valley. Wang, a ray of light engulfed him, and his figure immediately disappeared. When he appeared once more, he'd already arrived at an unfamiliar place. This was a barren land, and round rocks could be seen everywhere, gray and unadorned. Is this a small world? Ling Han looked into the distance. In ancient times, there was a powerful being that could forcibly separate a city, or even a larger place from the original world, overlapping with the existing world and becoming a mystic realm. It was very mystical. Such a method was nature-defying, at least in Ling Han's previous life. He definitely couldn't do it. He was just about to release Guang Yuan and Li Sichuan when he was startled because not far from him another person was teleported in. After entering the mystic realm, the teleportation was random, and everyone would appear in different places. It was a very outstanding beauty, her skin white and sparkling like fine jade. She was tall, long-legged, and voluptuous, very alluring. She appeared a bit dazed but quickly calmed down, and at the same time discovered Ling Han, but revealed a vigilant expression. Fighting for treasures in the mystic realm, everyone was a potential enemy. So what if it was a heaven-grade alchemist? Here, the most important thing was to be able to protect oneself. The spiritual qi here was really abundant. Ling Han withdrew his gaze. After he had advanced into the spiritual pedestal tier, every time he built a layer of his spiritual pedestal tier, he would need to expend an endless amount of origin power. Thus, even for him, the speed at which his cultivation advanced had dropped to the point that he could only increase one layer every 3 months. Actually, this wasn't slow, as he could complete the spiritual pedestal tier in 2 years. Who asked him to have such a solid foundation and be invincible in the same tier? Naturally, he had to pay some price. However, if he cultivated here, he could increase 1 level in 2 months. Unfortunately, the 12 heaven mystic realms would only open for a month or so each time. He was now in the middle stage of the first layer of the spiritual pedestal tier, and without some special opportunity when he left, he would only be in the second layer of the spiritual pedestal tier. Ling Han suddenly felt a sense of danger, and immediately held his sword in hand, standing solemnly without moving. The girl in the distance thought that Ling Han had the intention to kill her, and immediately turned to run. A strange scene appeared. A rock actually stood up, and with a punch the girl was instantly smashed into a bloody mess. Phone reading was more refreshing. Chapter 466. This was a stone man that had curled up its body like a stubborn rock, but now suddenly went berserk, smashing a delicate flower-like beauty into minced meat with one smash. The scene was somewhat miserable. The stone man wasn't very tall, only about a meter or so. Its head and limbs poked out of its irregular body, which was also formed by the accumulation of stones. Rock spirit, Ling Han said softly. Heaven and earth had spirits, and could give birth to all kinds of living beings, many of which weren't flesh and blood at all. For example, the Traiants were a race that had evolved from plants after gaining sentience. Another example was the heavenly flame, which was also a kind of living creature. A heavenly flame that had reached the great accomplishment stage could take on the form of a human. Even ordinary warriors would not be able to distinguish it from a real human. And this one in front of him was a rock spirit. Living beings of the 5 elements had a common characteristic, which was that they didn't feel the pain of normal living beings, and were also very, very difficult to kill. Strange fire didn't have a physical body at all, and couldn't be hurt by gravity, and could only be restrained by water-type arts. And the rock spirit's characteristic was its terrifying defense, just like Ling Han's previous rock cliff body. Although it wasn't comparable to rare metals of the same tier, it was still extremely tyrannical. After smacking the woman to death, the rock spirit turned to face Ling Han. It clearly had no facial features, but it still gave Ling Han a feeling of being stared at. Although this is a holy land for cultivation, it's also a dangerous place, Ling Han murmured. However, if I can collect a few rock spirits, then I can scatter beans and turn them into soldiers, and I'm sure it can give people a great surprise. The Thousand Corpse sect desired the spatial spirit tool in his hands that could accommodate living beings so much to hide the army inside. And when they launched a surprise attack, the effect would definitely be shocking. Just as he was lost in thought, the stone man had already rushed over and punched out. It was so powerful that it broke the speed of sound. Immediately, rings of air that could be seen with the naked eye formed behind its fist, and the sound of explosions rang out chaotically. Ling Han laughed and also punched out, saying, "You think I'm afraid of you? Let's see whose fist is harder." But when the two fists collided, a shockwave instantly burst out. Then the stone man was sent flying, and his entire right arm was shattered. Ling Han was surprised. He didn't hold back in this punch, he just didn't use any martial skills or fist chi. But he only broke one of the golem's arms and didn't completely explode. It could be seen how strong the golem's strength was, and how tough its physique was. There was no need to hold back against the stone men, because the stone man's shattered arm turned into countless pebbles that fell to the ground, but they immediately began to roll again, as if each of them had a life of their own. When they gathered at the foot of the stone man, they all flew up and connected to its broken arm. In just an instant, the stoneman's arm recovered to its original state. The strange fire did not have a physical body and could not be harmed by brute force. The stone man, on the other hand, had a strong physique and a frightening recovery ability. The stoneman's head opened like a large mouth, and it let out a furious roar. It had never suffered such a big loss before, actually having its arm blown up by someone. Tung, it rushed towards Ling Han with large strides. With each step the ground trembled slightly, showing its terrifying weight. Punched out again. "I can't beat you into submission." Ling Han smiled and also punched out. Pong, the stoneman's right arm was shattered again. This time Ling Han didn't wait for it to recover, but instead rushed up and gave it a flurry of punches. The stoneman's body was very sturdy, not less than rare metals of the same level, but it couldn't be compared after all. Otherwise it would be an iron man and not a stone man. Compared to the metal spirit, the rock spirit's defense was slightly lacking, but its recovery ability was powerful. After taking a dozen punches, the stoneman was instantly blasted into pieces, scattering all over the ground. But these small stones immediately started rolling again, and began to reform. Ling Han didn't stop it, but when the reform was about to be completed, he punched out again. Another ground full of crushed stones. The stoneman began to reform again, but every time it was about to be completed, it was once again scattered by Ling Han. After 5 times in a row it finally stopped reforming. Several hundred crushed stones wriggled one after another, and actually became several hundred little stone men. These stone men roared in unison, and instantly, the stones lying on this desolate plain stood up. They were all stone men. Fuck. Even Ling Han was a little surprised. He actually fell into the lair of the stone men. This was really extremely bad luck or extremely good luck. All the stone men roared at the sky and responded, "Haha." Ling Han laughed loudly. With so many stone men he could build a powerful army for him. He waved his hand and said, "Quickly come to the bowl." Pong, 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 there were at least 100 large stone men here, and they all rushed towards Ling Han, and that shattered stoneman also took the opportunity to complete its reform. The life force and recovery ability of this kind of living thing was really a little too strong. Ling Han met them head-on, and launched a frenzied attack at these stone men. His battle prowess was too terrifying, and he could send a stoneman flying with a single punch. But these stone men were not injured at all, and immediately charged back. Not easy to deal with. Just right, he could use them to sharpen his fist darts. Ling Han launched the War Elephant Fist, and 7 flashes of energy surged, transforming into a total of 8 ancient war elephants that charged towards these stone men. Now that he was serious, his battle prowess immediately skyrocketed. The war elephants crushed, and as long as they collided with the stonemen, they would be smashed into pieces. However, this only suppressed the stonemen, and couldn't destroy these stonemen's powerful recovery ability. They were still reforming, and once again joined the battle. Ling Han considered putting them into the Black Tower, but each stoneman had its own consciousness, and it was the same even after they were shattered, so he couldn't put them into the Black Tower no matter what. If he didn't give them a taste of his power, they wouldn't learn their lesson. Ling Han unleashed the demon birth sword. With the destructive power of a 10th tier spirit tool, could these stonemen still recover if he slashed with the sword? Once the demon birth sword appeared, instantly, the 10th tier spirit tool's ferocious might overflowed. These stonemen's ferocity was greatly restrained, and they actually hesitated. One had to know that they were extremely ferocious just now, without the slightest bit of scruples. Haha, you guys also know fear? Ling Han said, laughing. These stonemen were naturally ferocious, and they immediately regained their ferocity, attacking Ling Han. Ling Han unsheathed the demon birth sword, and instantly 9 flashes of sword chi surged, sweeping towards those stonemen. The stonemen's intelligence wasn't high, but they had an instinctive sense of danger. All of them dodged the demon birth sword's sharpness, but in the end they couldn't completely avoid the sword chi. Pew. Instantly many stonemen were hit by the sword chi and were sliced into 2 without any suspense. This time, the stonemen's reconstruction became much slower. This was the sword chi struck by a 10th tier spirit tool, possessing terrifying destructive power. Even with the stonemen's recovery ability, they couldn't immediately complete the reconstruction. Ling Han once again suppressed all the stonemen with his own power, displaying the style of being invincible in the spiritual pedestal tier. These stonemen all retreated, then pounced together, piling up into a human pyramid. Seeing these stonemen continuously drilling into each other's bodies, Ling Han couldn't help but be surprised and blurted out, "It can't be that these stonemen all split from a large rock spirit, right?" Chapter 467. What is the origin of that mountain valley? Why are there so many deity transformation tier demonic beasts? Ling Han was curious. Deity transformation tier demonic beasts could rule over an entire mountain region by themselves, so how could they possibly live together? It was completely illogical. The large white rabbit said, "That's natural. There is a heaven tier eagle king in the valley, a purple jade azure eagle, an ancient remnant species, a king among kings, ruling over tens of thousands of beasts." Ling Han sighed. In his last life, this kind of eagle king was definitely an invincible existence. It was not as simple as being a king among demonic beasts, but a king among kings, being able to stand side by side with the Sword Emperor and the heavenly phoenix divine maiden. And in this life, this kind of beast king still had the chance to advance a step further, and advance into the shattering void tier. If it really managed to take that step, then it would really be the strongest existence in the world, practically peerless. "You're quite daring to barge in," Ling Han said with a smile. "Rabbits and eagles cannot coexist, so Uncle Rabbit obviously has to give that bastard some trouble, and steal all its spirit medicine. I definitely can't let it advance into the shattering void tier." The large white rabbit shouted. Ling Han laughed loudly and said, "What a pity. A heaven tier king among demonic beasts can teach you how to behave with a single claw. Damn brat, do you know how to chat? Can't you say something nice?" The large white rabbit said in displeasure. Biting your Uncle Rabbit again." Hunyo humphed and said, "Don't be fierce to Nyo's Ling Han, or else I'll eat you. Let go, let go." The large white rabbit only knew how to scream. As they spoke, they also arrived at the agreed rendezvous point. The small village was in sight, but the villagers had all turned into corpse soldiers, already killed by Ling Han and the others earlier. "Why did you guys only come now?" Yi Rong appeared, and said unhappily to everyone. Did they know how long he'd waited? He was a genius that obtained direct entry into the Restore Heaven Academy. How valuable was his time? It actually took him as long as half a day. "We encountered something," Qin Lianyu said, and recounted the matter of encountering the Beast Tide riot. "What?" Yi Rong was shocked. "No wonder I felt the mountains crumble and the earth split earlier. So it was actually a beast tide erupting. and all of them were at the level of the deity transformation tier. Lady Qin, fortunately, you're fine. His eyes burned as he looked at Qin Lianyu, so fiery that it was somewhat unbearable. Ling Han made an O sound, took out a spirit peach, threw it over and said, "Here's yours." Yirong subconsciously caught it, stared blankly for a moment and said, "You guys actually plucked a spirit peach. Truly inconceivable, plucking a spirit peach under the circumstances of a beast tide erupting." However, he used a divine travel spirit talisman in exchange for a spirit peach. Even if this was a 7th-tier spirit fruit, it was still too much of a loss. However, who told them to encounter a beast tide? So obtaining a spirit peach was better than not having one at all. Yirong gloomily put away the spirit peach. This was a 7th-tier spirit fruit after all, so of course it couldn't be eaten carelessly. It was best to leave it for when one encountered a bottleneck in cultivation. Then, after eating the spirit fruit, heaven and earth's inspiration would interweave, and there might be a breakthrough. Seeing this, everyone shook their heads. One had to know that they ate the spirit fruit casually. Different people had different fates as expected. Why is there a rabbit? Yirong stared at the large white rabbit. A rabbit that could grow to such a size was undoubtedly a beast. Previously, Qin Lianyu only said that a beast tide had erupted, and didn't say that the beast tide this time was actually caused by the ruffian rabbit stealing the dragon blood tyrant ginseng. With Yirong's eyesight, he obviously couldn't see through a spiritual infant-tier beast rabbit. The ruffian rabbit revealed its true form, and yelled at Yirong, "What? Uncle Rabbit will kick your face full of blood." The corner of Yirong's mouth instantly twitched. A beast that could actually speak was extremely inconceivable. But what he didn't expect even more was that this rabbit's mouth was actually so despicable, capable of angering people to the point of exploding in a matter of minutes. This beast rabbit can actually speak. He suppressed the fury in his heart, and raised his head to confirm with Qin Lianyu. This was hard to believe. There were indeed beasts with intelligence that didn't lose to humans, but being able to speak human language was unheard of, not to mention being so ruffian. "The boundless world has all sorts of strange things," Qin Lianyu said. "Come, let's go to the Restore Heaven Academy," Ling Han said. Everyone set off again. The ruffian rabbit was very attentive to Ling Han. This human casually took out 1,000-year-old ginseng as a side dish, so he should be extremely wealthy, making it envious. It stared at Ling Han for food, yet it would always suffer Hunyo's sneak attacks. It didn't know how many bites it took, and screaming was its daily routine. What was rare was that no matter how many times Hunyo abused it, it seemed to view Hunyo as its first love. It only ran and never thought of counterattacking, making Ling Han click his tongue in wonder. It was truly strange. After entering the Flying Flower County, travel-worn youngsters could be seen from time to time. Most of them weren't even 50 years old. 50-year-old flower blossom tier and spiritual infant tier cultivators could obviously be classified as young. However, those over 100 years old obviously wouldn't compete with youngsters. They couldn't put down their old face. Isn't this Brother Yirong? Ling Han and the others had just walked out of a small town, and were about to hurry on their way when they saw a group of people walk out from the side. Someone recognized Yirong, and immediately called out with a pleasantly surprised expression, "You are..." Yirong hesitated slightly. He indeed didn't recognize the other party. "I'm Hoji." The other party hurriedly introduced himself. "I'm a disciple of the 5 Elements Valley. 2 years ago, I met Brother Yi on the 12 consecutive rings. At that time, Brother Yi had won 12 consecutive victories, becoming one of the few winners since the 12 consecutive rings' inception. I really admire you from the bottom of my heart." Only then did Yirong give an "oh," and an expression of realization appeared on his face. In reality, he only remembered the 12 consecutive rings, so how could he possibly remember the people who had once been below the ring? However, he had made a name for himself in the 12 consecutive rings. Being mentioned by the other party, he couldn't help but feel pleased with himself. He revealed a pleased expression, and instantly, his favorable impression of this person increased greatly. Come. Let me introduce everyone. This is Brother Yirong, an outstanding disciple of the Flying Star sect. He has obtained the direct entry qualification to the Restore Heaven Academy, Hoji introduced to his friend. Everyone instantly cried out in surprise. What flying star sect 12 rings were all very abstract, but the phrase direct entry qualification to the Restore Heaven Academy could represent everything. An awesome genius. Instantly, those people all gathered around, and none of them didn't reveal expressions of worship, greatly satisfying Yi Rong's vanity, and he was in no hurry to leave. Qin Lianyu couldn't help but cough and said, "Can we be on our way?" In front of young Master Yi, what right do you have to speak? One person reprimanded Qin Lianyu, anxiously flattering Yi Rong. Yi Rong instantly revealed a displeased expression, and said, "This is Dark Glory Valley's Qin Lianyu. Lady Qin, my good friend. Quickly apologized to Lady Qin." Once that person heard, how could he not know that Yi Rong was interested in Qin Lianyu? He hurriedly bowed and said, "I didn't know it was Lady Qin. I hope Lady Qin can forgive me." Qin Lianyu sneered and said, "Yi Rong, just accompany them. We can't afford to associate with an important person like you." She'd had enough of listening to him brag along the way. Phone reading was more refreshing. Chapter 468. Hey. No way. Is it really okay to play like this? Ling Han sighed. He had finally gained the upper hand after much difficulty, and had even formed the 10th flash of sword chi. Everything was perfect, but suddenly the opponent cheated and didn't fight you in the same tier, wanting to advance to the flower blossom tier. How could he stand it? Ling Han was freakish. He was only at the first layer of the spiritual pedestal tier, but his battle prowess already reached half-step to the flower blossom tier. Even if he advanced to the 9th layer of the spiritual pedestal tier, his battle prowess was still half-step to the flower blossom tier, just a stronger half-step to the flower blossom tier. How could mortal boundaries be so easy to cross? Even Rain Emperor relied on the country's power to forcibly raise his half-step flower blossom tier strength to the flower blossom tier. The country's power. How many people and martial artists were there in Rain Country? Earlier, the massive golem dispersed into countless small golems, lying on the ground like stubborn rocks, probably absorbing the power of the earth, making the final effort to break through to the flower blossom tier. Thus, his and that woman's arrival didn't immediately alarm the golem, because it was at a crucial moment. That woman also didn't pay attention and stepped on the rock, which naturally made the golem feel a sense of danger, killing her with a casual slap. When a martial artist was in seclusion and had his nose poked with a finger, would you explode with anger and want to kill? Now that the massive golem couldn't beat Ling Han, it could only forcefully start breaking through. As long as it advanced to the flower blossom tier, killing Ling Han would be as easy as turning over its hand. This wasn't just revenge but also for survival, so it had to fight. Ling Han wanted to stop the golem from taking this step, but after some thought, he dismissed the idea. He wholeheartedly subdued this massive golem, so the stronger it was, the better. The golem could cheat, but so could he. Small Tower, is there any way to attack? Ling Han asked. This was a mystery realm, a small world. Small Tower immediately said, although this is a small world, and I also absorbed some source power, it's still not enough to conceal the power fluctuations when attacking. Ling Han was instantly disappointed. After all this time it still couldn't be used, so he could only stop this massive golem's breakthrough or turn around and run. However, if you only unleash the Black Tower, and do not use any power, I can still suppress this kind of aura fluctuation, Small Tower continued. Oh, Ling Han's heart moved. If he unleashed the Black Tower and lured the massive golem inside, then inside the Black Tower, not to mention Flower Blossom tier warriors, even Shattering Void tier ones would have to listen obediently. He immediately made up his mind to let the massive golem break through, and subdue a Flower Blossom tier rock spirit. Each of the 5 elemental spirits had their own special abilities. The mystical fire could assist in alchemy, the rock spirit could nourish the earth, the metal spirit could make weapons sharper and stronger, the wood spirit was the source of life and had amazing healing effects, and the water spirit could summon clouds and rain, relieving drought. Ling Han silently waited for the massive golem's breakthrough. Being idle, he summoned Guang Yuan and Li Xichan out of the Black Tower, and the 3 of them started cultivating together. The spiritual qi here was too dense, forming streaks of spiritual mist. Cultivating for one day was equivalent to cultivating for dozens of days outside. Ling Han and Guang Yuan were both martial art fanatics, so they obviously entered the state at the first moment. Although Li Sichan mainly focused on alchemy, cultivation was still needed. She didn't have a mystical fire, so her alchemy level was limited by martial art. Therefore, she quickly began to cultivate. They all took medicinal pills to assist in cultivation, further speeding up their cultivation speed. They only stopped when their soul power was exhausted. At this time, the massive golem was still in the midst of breaking through. Rocks crumbled all over its body, and its entire body was actually shrinking. Ling Han was clear that this wasn't the massive golem's failure. On the contrary, it was walking quite solidly on this path. The flower blossom tear was breaking away from the mortal body, and for the rock spirit it was the same. It condensed the essence within its body, shedding the useless stubborn rock, and developed towards a higher level of life. "What's that, big guy?" Li Sichan finally had the time to ask. Rock spirit, a worldly strange rock with intelligence, transforming into a living being, Ling Han said simply. "It seems to be undergoing some kind of transformation," Guang Yuan said. "Yes." Ling Han nodded. "It's breaking through to the flower blossom tier, and I'm waiting for it. After it successfully breaks through, I'll subdue it." Pooh! Guang Yuan and Li Sichan spurted out at the same time, feeling that Ling Han had gone mad. Flower blossom tier? Weren't these 3 words enough? Under the flower blossom tier, all were ants. No matter how freakish Ling Han was, he couldn't possibly compare to the flower blossom tier, unless he ascended to the throne and triggered the great power of a nation, like the Rain Emperor. Would the rock spirit be merciful because you were a heaven-grade alchemist? Obviously not. Young Master Han. Guang Yuan and Li Sichan both looked nervous. No matter. Ling Han smiled faintly. He had the Black Tower, which was his greatest trump card. Guang Yuan and Li Sichan obviously thought of it as well. Although they didn't know what the Black Tower was, they only knew that Ling Han could hide in that absolutely safe place in times of danger. After cultivating, Guang Yuan and Li Sichan returned to the Black Tower. The massive golem could complete its breakthrough at any time, so don't be flustered at that time. Sure enough, after only another 2 hours, the massive golem suddenly let out a violent roar. The sound waves soared into the sky, tearing apart the clouds with a shockingly terrifying momentum. Its height shrunk to about 3 meters, still much taller than normal people, but compared to its previous height of 30 meters, it could be said to be miniaturized. Flower blossom tear, this rock spirit already shed its mortal body, stepping into the realm that all living beings yearned for even in their dreams. It was different, completely different. This stone man's aura was like the ocean, and patterns actually appeared on its body. They looked a little like words but also a little like pictures. It was impossible to tell them apart. They were ancient and simple, like an ancient language that had existed since the primordial age. The massive golem proudly looked at Ling Han. Although it still didn't evolve its eyes, its feet actually left slowly, floating in the air. Flower blossom tear, able to fly with the physical body. A fat golem floating in the air. This scene was a bit comical. Ling Han laughed loudly and said, "Blockhead, come and hit me." As he transmitted his thoughts to Small Tower, he said, "You can begin." Small Tower didn't answer, and directly unleashed the Black Tower. Wang! A pitch-black pagoda appeared. At first, it was only 3 meters tall, but it immediately expanded, reaching a height of 300 meters. At the bottom, a door opened, revealing a muddled entrance. From the outside, there was nothing but primal chaos, and nothing could be seen. The Black Tower was extremely plain. There were no golden words of the indestructible heaven scroll floating, nor any ancient primeval aura rising. It couldn't be any more ordinary. Ling Han knew that this was Small Tower controlling the circulation of the Black Tower's aura. Otherwise, as long as it leaked out, it would attract the attention of the upper realm's supreme beings, who would directly break through the realm and enter to snatch the Black Tower. "Big guy, come to the bowl, come to the tower." Phone reading was more refreshing. Chapter 469. The massive golem went berserk. A mere human insignificant creature dared to provoke it again and again, especially when it already advanced into the flower blossom tier. This was an upgrade in the level of life, surpassing Ling Han by who knew how many times. If its intelligence was normal, then it would definitely be fearful of a black tower that suddenly appeared, but the rock spirit moved based on instinct and instinctively felt that this black tower was ordinary, so what was there for it to be afraid of? Xiao, it immediately tore through the air, and a terrifying aura swept past, causing the earth to tremble. Meanwhile, Ling Han's face turned pale and his skin rippled. This wasn't as simple as spiritual pressure. The flower blossom tear's aura could completely materialize, especially a rock spirit that was born from heaven and earth. That kind of pressure was too powerful. Ling Han slowly retreated and arrived at the entrance of the Black Tower. The massive golem pounced. It wanted to crush this human with one punch, daring to break its head and arms several times. Ling Han took another step back and Xiao, his entire body already entered the Black Tower. The massive golem didn't hesitate and charged in. Seeing that Ling Han wasn't far from it, it instantly became ferocious and flew over, smashing a fist towards Ling Han's head. It wanted to blast Ling Han into minced meat. "Stop," Ling Han said softly, and the massive golem's movements instantly stopped. Inside the Black Tower, he was the master. At this moment, Small Tower had already turned the Black Tower into a mustard seed again. Even if it was just unleashing the Black Tower and controlling the leakage of its aura, it was a burden for Small Tower. It would consume source power, so it obviously didn't want to waste it. The massive golem was a bit dazed. Why did it suddenly not move? Its intelligence wasn't enough, and it instantly shook its head as if racking its brains to understand. Ling Han laughed loudly, and with a wave of his fingers, the massive golem immediately flipped upside down. The massive golem opened its mouth and roared, and a sound wave instantly attacked. "Stop again," Ling Han said softly, and the sound wave abruptly stopped, stopping in the air as if time and space could be paused. He walked over and kneaded it casually. This arc of sound wave was kneaded into a ball by him before he pressed it toward the gigantic golem. Pong! The power of the sound wave exploded and instantly sent the massive golem flying. There was even a huge dent in its chest. Now that the massive golem advanced into the flower blossom tier, the power of the sound wave was obviously on another level. Moreover, it was combined by Ling Han and concentrated at one point to explode, which was even more terrifying. Ling Han smiled and said, "Big guy, are you convinced yet?" The large golem crawled up, and the shattered rocks immediately flew toward its chest. As if it was made of water, it quickly recovered to its original state. There was not even a wound. It glared fiercely at Ling Han. Xiao it once again shot out and attacked Ling Han. Ling Han casually waved his fingers. This powerful opponent that could compete with him in the spiritual pedestal tier, although advanced into the flower blossom tier, didn't even have the slightest power to fight back. However, this massive golem was truly fierce. No matter how Ling Han tormented it, even shattering it into thousands of pieces to prevent its recovery, it refused to surrender. Every time Ling Han released the suppression, it would fiercely attack Ling Han. Ling Han couldn't help but lose his patience. How long would it be tormented for? "I'll do it." Small Tower appeared and lightly vibrated its body. Pa! A scene that made Ling Han's eyeballs pop out appeared. The massive golem actually knelt towards Small Tower. It was clearly a golem, but Ling Han could actually see the pious expression on its face. Holy shit! If he knew Small Tower was so kick-ass, he should have let it go straight away. Ling Han understood in his heart that an existence born from heaven and earth like the rock spirit didn't fear death at all. For them, death was merely returning to heaven and earth. They were proud because they were born from heaven and earth, standing high above and looking down on all living things. So no matter how Ling Han suppressed it, it was useless, only inciting the rock spirit's fury and unyieldingness. However, Small Tower's life level was far above the rock spirit's, like a born king, so the rock spirit could only kneel when it saw it. Small Tower trembled slightly, releasing waves of fluctuation, while the rock spirit continuously nodded as if the two were communicating. After a while, the massive golem crawled up and obediently walked to Ling Han's side, intimately rubbing its head against his shoulder like a dog. The corner of Ling Han's mouth twitched. The previously rebellious big guy was now as obedient as a dog, which he couldn't quite accept. A master. The golem transmitted a divine sense. The rock spirit was the same as the fire spirit, unable to speak but didn't need to. They innately could use divine sense which crossed the language barrier. Ling Han laughed and said to Small Tower, "What did you say to it to make it so obedient?" "I told it that you're my master, so you're naturally its master too," Small Tower said indifferently. "It was that simple?" Ling Han sighed, full of emotion. The Black Tower was really too awesome, subduing a flower blossom tier rock spirit so easily. If it was another person, even if it was a shattering void tier, it would be useless. At most they could shatter the rock spirit with a slap, but it would be impossible to subdue it. "Master hungry, eat rock?" The massive golem transmitted a divine sense to Ling Han. "Shit, why did it turn into another glutton?" Ling Han slapped his forehead with his palm. But this big guy probably wasn't as gluttonous as Hunyo. But like strange fire, this was a need for its own strength. Strange fire could devour strange fire to improve itself, while the rock spirit devoured other spirit stones. He immediately thought of heavenly luck stone, which was also a precious stone nurtured by heaven and earth, but he hurriedly shook his head. This thing could nurture a genius, and it would be too wasteful to let the rock spirit devour it. There were plenty of strange stones in the world. Ling Han nodded and said, "Follow me, the boss, and you'll have stones." The massive golem laughed foolishly, as silly as an idiot. Ling Han looked at the other party and couldn't help but have a sudden thought, hurriedly saying, "You can change your body at will, right?" "Oh right, I'll give you a name first. Now that you have Small Tower and Small Fire, you'll be called Small Rock." The massive golem obviously wouldn't object, and only nodded, transmitting a certain divine sense. Ling Han made it raise 36 stone pillars above its head. They were very short, only needing the length of a finger. Although the massive golem didn't understand, it didn't even ask, obediently doing as it was told as if it suddenly grew hair. It worked as expected. Ling Han transmitted his divine sense again, making it change the position of the stone pillars, forming a very mysterious pattern. He wasn't playing around. Earlier he had a sudden thought. The rock spirit's body was extremely sturdy, only slightly inferior to rare metals of the same tier. So what if he carved the Tiandu Thunderstar formation on it? This was a trial, and if it worked he'd carve a 6th tier formation, or a 7th tier formation on it in the future. Phone reading was more refreshing. Chapter 470. Ling Han was a man of action, immediately carving formation patterns on the massive golem's hair. These 36 hairs were the formation's eyes. He'd obtained the Tiandu Thunderstar formation for many days and had long mastered the formation patterns, but hadn't been able to lay it out due to the lack of materials. Now that there was such a large piece of material before him, it instantly made him eager to try. Previously, he'd already carved formation patterns on ordinary stones, so it was a piece of cake now. After advancing to the spiritual pedestal tier, his divine sense also improved greatly. Thus, he could now carve 3 formation patterns in one go, then cultivate for 5 to 6 hours and carve another 3 formation patterns. Calculating like this, he could carve about 10 formation patterns a day, and in less than 4 days, he completed 36 formations eyes. Inside the Black Tower there was no Tao of heaven and earth. Ling Han summoned the massive golem and said, "Sacrifice the formation's eyes." Tsang tsang tsang, stone pillars immediately emerged on top of the massive golem's head, forming a formation. Instantly, the formation patterns shone, and the power of heaven and earth converged. The entire formation was densely woven with white lightning. The massive golem threw a punch. Zzz, bolts of lightning followed, awe-inspiring and shockingly terrifying. Ha 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 ha. Ling Han laughed loudly, appearing very satisfied. This was a true movement formation. He stroked his chin. There were also formation patterns on Ing Hong's body, forming a shocking defensive effect that could even block Hunyo's attack. This proved that the human body could also be used as a formation's eye, and his sudden idea was inspired by this. "I've already cultivated body of iron sheet, and my physique is comparable to rare metals of the same tier, so I should also be able to withstand the formation pattern's power of heaven and earth, as long as the formation's level doesn't surpass my tier," Ling Han pondered. If he could also carve formation patterns like Ing Hong on his body, his defense could increase by another level. "I've stayed here for 4 days, so it's time to depart." Ling Han stored the massive golem into the Black Tower. Things were much easier now. The massive golem was loyal to him like a dog, so it obviously wouldn't resist his divine sense. Ling Han, Guang Yuan, and Li Xichan traveled together. They actually didn't know where to go, but in any case they decided to walk first. This was not a real world. The sky was always covered by clouds, and the sun could not be seen. However, there was also day and night, which was the change between light and dark. There was no moon at night. After the three of them walked for a while, the wilderness area was already behind them. A vast plain appeared in front of them. The grass was like a carpet, only reaching the tops of their feet. The gentle breeze made them feel comfortable. "Wait," Ling Han suddenly said. He took a few steps forward to the left and pushed aside the grass with his foot. Immediately, a blood-stained bone appeared. Guang Yuan also walked over. After carefully examining it for a while, he said, "This is a human clavicle." Ling Han nodded and said, "It should be a martial artist who entered this place, but if he was injured by someone, it would be impossible for only a piece of bone to be left. Moreover, from the fracture point, it seems like he was bitten off by sharp teeth." The three demonic beasts came to a conclusion at the same time. Why wasn't there any before? Li Xichan was a bit puzzled. Ling Han thought for a while and said, "That was Little Stone's territory before, so the demonic beasts didn't dare to invade. From this, we can be sure that this demonic beast or group of demonic beasts shouldn't be Little Stone's match." Li Xichan and Guang Yuan didn't dare to be careless. The rock spirit was in the 9th layer of the spiritual pedestal tier before, and only Ling Han could disregard it. One of them was in the 9th layer of the spiritual ocean tier, and the other just entered the gushing spring tier, far from it. They continued forward, and after walking for a while, a fishy wind suddenly came. "Demonic beast nest," Ling Han immediately said. He leapt up, and after a few leaps, he discovered that a barren piece of land had appeared on the grassy ground. A hole had been dug out, and the fishy smell was coming from there. As if it had also heard Ling Han's voice, a demonic beast emerged from the cave. It was no more than 3 feet long, and its entire body was dusky. It looked a bit like a wolf, but its mouth was flat like a duck's. "Flat-mouthed vicious hoe." Ling Han revealed a smile. "The leader of the vicious hoe is very likely to have the bloodline of a king. That's great nourishment." Even a normal vicious hoe was in the spiritual ocean tier. Raised in the Black Tower and eaten in the future, it would definitely make one drool. "Xichan, you go back first," Ling Han said. He waved at Li Xichan and put her into the Black Tower. "Young Master Han, then I'll go first." Guang Yuan shouted and charged out. Although he was still in the 9th layer of the spiritual ocean tier, he had stepped into the spiritual pedestal tier after all, and with Ling Han's guidance, he learned War Elephant Fist. His battle prowess was quite extraordinary in the spiritual ocean tier. With a few moves, the vicious hoe fled while covering its head. However, this was a demonic beast nest. One after another, vicious hoe came out. At least a dozen of them were in the spiritual ocean tier, and the last few even stepped into the spiritual pedestal tier. They had a unique divine light, and there was a pattern on their foreheads that emitted a vicious light. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "Brother Guang, I'll leave all the spiritual ocean tier demonic beasts to you. I'll take care of these spiritual pedestal tier ones, but don't kill them. They'll be our delicacies in the future." "Young Master Han, this requirement is a bit high." Guang Yuan attacked while complaining to Ling Han. At least 4 of these vicious hoe reached the 9th layer of the spiritual ocean tier, and it was difficult for him to win, not to mention taking them down without injuring them. Ling Han smiled and said, "Can't you do it?" "I'll try my best." Guang Yuan gritted his teeth and raised his fists, attacking those vicious hoe. A few spiritual pedestal tier vicious hoe wanted to help, but were blocked by Ling Han. "Your opponent is me." Ling Han smiled and casually threw a few punches. Pung pung pung, these vicious hoe were all knocked over by him. In the spiritual pedestal tier, there were really few that could fight against Ling Han. He stored these vicious hoe into the Black Tower. Then Guang Yuan fought the other vicious hoe. He was slightly startled, feeling a hint of danger. He couldn't help but turn his head, only to see an old vicious hoe crawl out of a cave. The hair on the corners of its mouth had already turned gray, but the presence it emitted made even Ling Han not dare to be careless. As expected, King Tier. Ling Han's eyes lit up. This was a 9th layer spiritual pedestal tier old vicious hoe, but it was different with king tier bloodline. Its battle prowess would far surpass normal 9th layer spiritual pedestal tier beasts. However, king tier against king tier, Ling Han obviously wasn't afraid at all. He smiled and said, "Brother Guang, you're about to break through to the spiritual pedestal tier again, and this king tier beast can help you take this step? Thank you, young Master Han." Guang Yuan was overjoyed. To break through to the next tier, it obviously needed the support of a huge amount of energy, or else it could only be accumulated over time and then formed into an explosion rushing over in one go. However, this would take a long time and it might not succeed. However, a king tier beast was different. Its flesh and blood essence was like a precious medicine, definitely able to provide enough energy support. Chapter 471. Small Tower did not respond. It was unknown whether it was too lazy to respond, or because it had lost its memory, it did not know. Ling Han did not receive an answer, but he was not disappointed. He had only asked casually in the first place, and did not really expect to receive an answer from Small Tower. He carefully studied these patterns, pondering over the profound mysteries within. "I seem to understand a little," Ling Han said to himself. The bottom of this bottle was actually a spirit tool in itself. After he injected his divine sense into it, the profound mysteries of the spirit tool were also revealed to him. That old man said that this was a refined celestial bottle, which was naturally too exaggerated. However, the bottom of this bottle is flat on the outside and concave on the inside, so it is actually a bowl. The inside has its own space and can absorb all things and refine them, turning them into the most basic essence qi. Isn't this equivalent to refining origin crystals? Ling Han was extremely astonished. He continuously moved this bowl around and now it was a stone bowl. It was very small, and the mouth of the bowl was only the size of a palm. However, the inside could form an extremely large space which was very mystical. He pulled out 5 stalks of spirit medicine, and then drew out the stone bowl. Spiritual power poured into it, and the veins on the surface of the bowl immediately lit up. The entire stone bowl became resplendent, and released a powerful suction force. Those 5 stalks of spirit medicine immediately flew up, and they disappeared into the bowl. As expected, there was another space inside. The few stalks of spirit medicine were obviously bigger than the stone bowl itself, but they were swallowed cleanly by the stone bowl without any difficulty. In a short while, Ling Han smelled a sweet fragrance coming from the stone bowl. He looked again, and saw that there was no longer any spirit medicine left in the bowl. It had turned into a drop of light green liquid, emitting a sweet fragrance that gladdened the heart and refreshed the mind. Those were 5 stalks of spirit medicine, and each stalk was in the 5th tier, but only a drop of medicinal liquid was formed. This was too exaggerated. Ling Han retracted his origin power, and the stone bowl instantly lost its brilliance, becoming extremely plain. It looked like an old antique on the surface. He turned the stone bowl upside down, and poured the liquid into his mouth. That green drop slowly fell. It fell into his mouth. Instantly an indescribable sweet fragrance filled his mouth, making him feel as if he was about to ascend to become a deity. But what was even more shocking was that kind of incomparably pure energy entered his stomach through his throat, then spread and circulated throughout his entire body. Such pure medicinal power. Ling Han sighed ruefully. Generally speaking, no matter if it was spirit medicine or alchemical pills, most of them only had the effect of accumulating origin power. However, from the flower blossom tier onwards, what martial artists needed more was the comprehension of Tao. For example, in the flower blossom tier, to make the Tao flower grow, one had to inscribe martial intent on it. This was nourishment. A great alchemist as strong as Ling Han could extract the heaven and earth's intent from medicinal ingredients. Eating it would allow one to connect with the Tao, and thus have the effect of improving one's martial arts. However, this stone bowl had the same effect. There were extremely shocking patterns of the Tao in the spiritual liquid. It's equivalent to a great alchemist. Moreover, after a level 5 material is purified, it actually reaches the effect of a level 6 material, which even surpasses the effect of alchemical pills. Not only can medicinal ingredients be purified, even spirit stones and rare metals can be purified, Even living beings can be purified. I understand why the predecessor sealed it in another spirit tool to conceal its existence, because this thing is truly nature-defying, even harming the harmony of the world. If it fell into the hands of an evil person, it would be too dangerous to refine all living beings to nourish oneself. Ling Han sighed. The predecessors probably couldn't bear to destroy such a precious treasure, so they threw the bright pearl into the dark, burying it in another spirit tool. Tools, in and of themselves, aren't divided into good and bad. It all depends on the intentions of the user. I definitely won't use this to harm all living beings in the world. Otherwise, even if I could obtain an endless supply of spiritual liquid, my heart would be shrouded in a demonic barrier. So how far could I advance on the path of martial arts? He cultivated the path of the strongest, and not the emotionlessness or the path of slaughter. Otherwise, for the latter two, using this stone bowl to slaughter all living beings would be more in line with the path they chose. Small tower. I seem to have obtained something incredible, Ling Han said with a smile. Small tower appeared. It stared at the stone bowl for a while and said, I remember now, this should be the heaven transformation bowl. However, this definitely isn't the real thing. In my hazy memory, the heaven transformation bowl has long since been shattered, and this is an imitation. It's not bad, right? If you give it to me, I can extract 7 flashes of source power. Only 7. Ling Han thought for a moment and said, that large primal chaos source rock, how much source power did you extract? 9. Small tower replied calmly. This stone bowl was actually not as strong as that primal chaos source rock? Hold on, the primal chaos source rock was something that even the Azura demon emperor would go crazy over. Moreover, just how big was it? The stone bowl was only so small, yet it could extract 7 flashes of source power. It could be seen that the material it was made of was not the slightest bit inferior. For example, a piece of godly metal that was only 1.5 kilograms was forged into a level 10 spirit tool, while another piece of godly metal that was 5 kilograms was forged into an original embryo. Then, according to Small Tower's calculations, the latter piece would definitely be more valuable. However, for cultivators it would be 100 times more valuable than the former piece. From different perspectives, the value of each item would be different. Ling Han was pleasantly surprised. This stone bowl could not replace alchemical pills, because it could only extract the purest energy. It was not like alchemical pills, which had a wide variety of uses. However, because it also had the effect of purification, allowing level 5 medicinal ingredients to possess the effects of level 6, it was very useful. There were too many low-level spirit herbs in the Black Tower. Originally they were not very useful, but now with the Heaven Transformation Bowl's purification, level 3 became level 4, level 4 became level 5, and the waste could be recycled. Ling Han made an attempt. He plucked out a large amount of level 3 medicinal ingredients and absorbed them into the Heaven Transformation Bowl for purification. Very soon they had turned into over 30 drops of liquid, but he did not stop. He continued to urge the Heaven Transformation Bowl, and these drops of liquid once again fused and purified, becoming 1 drop. He tasted it and could not help but smile. This was equivalent to a 2-star origin crystal, but it was easier to absorb because it was directly ingested into the body. A 2-star origin crystal was something that could only be refined by a spiritual pedestal tier elite, and was equivalent to a level 5 treasured medicine. A level 3 medicinal ingredient had become a level 5 medicinal ingredient. Although the quantity was pitifully small, it was a qualitative change. Ling Han was extremely satisfied. The Black Tower and the Heaven Transformation Bowl were practically a perfect match. His figure flashed and he exited the Black Tower. Strange, why did this brat suddenly appear? When Rabbit saw him, he could not help but call out loudly. Ling Han laughed mischievously and said, My Qinggong is becoming more and more awesome. This was definitely not Qinggong. Rabbit was certain in his heart. With his senses that were a whole tier higher, if Ling Han leapt over from a distance, he would definitely be able to detect him. It's about time we can go to the banquet, Ling Han said with a smile. Before the 3 of them set out, they had already asked around, so they knew where they should go now. After passing through a forest, a side courtyard suddenly appeared in front of them. It occupied a very large area, and there was actually a lake inside. This was definitely built recently. The walls and tiles were all very new. The Wang clan was really generous. Their young miss was cultivating here, and they had built a side courtyard here. Not only that, starting from the main entrance of the side courtyard, there was a road paved with bluestone. It extended all the way and was several miles long. On both sides of the road, there were large patches of trees. "Move to the side," a carriage drove over and the coachman shouted coldly. Chapter 472. Ling Han cooked the old vicious mongoose and let Guang Yuan eat most of the essence, while he and Li Xichan ate a small portion. After that, Guang Yuan immediately began to cultivate in seclusion again to break through to the spiritual pedestal tier, while Ling Han and Li Xichan also obtained considerable benefits and began to break through the barrier of the small tier. The higher the tier, the sturdier the barrier of the small tier and harder to break through. It was fine under the flower blossom tier, but after the flower blossom tier, each small tier was as difficult to break through as a large tier, requiring the help of natural treasures or medicinal pills. It could be said that before the flower blossom tier, medicinal pills were used to help martial artists quickly accumulate origin power, and from the flower blossom tier onwards, the importance of medicinal pills increased further, playing the role of helping to break through the shackles of the tier. The flesh of a king-level beast could be treated as a precious medicine of this level, so the effect was naturally great, helping the three accumulate origin power and break through to a higher tier. 2 hours later, Ling Han was the first to complete the breakthrough, advancing to the second layer of the spiritual pedestal tier, followed by Li Xichan, who reached the third layer of the gushing spring tier. Although it wasn't high, with her talent in martial art, such cultivation and such age, if she returned to the Rain country, she could be considered one of the geniuses. Taking advantage of the fact that Guang Yuan was still trying to break through, Ling Han took out the piece of bone with the engraved pattern. It was obviously just a bone pattern that seemed to be formed naturally, but it gave Ling Han a feeling of endless profoundness, as if some extremely profound Tao art was displayed in the form of a pattern. He studied it attentively, and the bone pattern continuously evolved in his consciousness, extremely complex. "I must master it, it can improve my battle prowess a lot," Ling Han said. It was easy to say but too difficult to do. Other than the indestructible heaven scroll, it was the first time Ling Han encountered a Tao art he couldn't immediately comprehend, which surprised him but also made him more interested. One had to know that the old vicious mongoose was only in the spiritual pedestal tier, yet it could grasp this bone pattern. Could it be that he was inferior to a beast? In any case, he was once a powerful warrior of the heaven tier, but even he couldn't grasp it quickly, which meant that the power of this bone pattern was indeed great. 2 days passed, and Guang Yuan finally came out and returned to the spiritual pedestal tier. "Congratulations, Brother Guang," Li Xichan said sweetly. Her coldness was only directed at outsiders. Guang Yuan was beside himself with joy. He had never thought that in just over half a year's time, he would once again return to the spiritual pedestal tier. Moreover, he was even more powerful than before. If he met Duan Zhengji again now, he was confident that he could kill the latter with his own abilities. "Thank you, young Master Han, for fulfilling my wish," he said, half kneeling towards Ling Han. Ling Han nodded and put away the old vicious mongoose's parietal bone. Not being able to comprehend this bone rune in 2 days made him very unhappy. They set off on their journey. In the distance, they could vaguely see a pillar of light rising into the sky, as if it was guiding their way. Since none of them knew where to go, they simply headed in that direction. Half a day later, a lake appeared in front of them. Before they even got close, a terrifying chill assaulted them, causing their blood to feel as if it was about to freeze. At the lakeside, there were at least 100 people surrounding it, and they were actually fishing. These people all came from outside not long ago and were definitely not natives of this place. They had never heard of the existence of residents here. Ling Han's gaze swept over and landed on his cousin Yu Kai-yu. This guy was currently holding a giant net, waving it about and throwing it into the lake. Then he fished it. His upper body was bare, revealing his bulging muscles, and he seemed to be selling meat. So many people were fishing. What did that mean? The fish here were definitely not simple. Ling Han walked over and activated his origin power to resist the chill. Fortunately, although this chill was bone-chilling, one could resist it if they reached the poly tier. Obviously, the chill came from the lake, but the entire lake's surface rippled and showed no signs of freezing, appearing extremely strange. Master Ling. Greetings, Master Ling. As Ling Han walked by, a considerable number of people paid their respects to him. Of course, there was also a small portion of people who ignored him, thinking that since they were not asking Ling Han to concoct alchemical pills for them, was there a need to flatter him? This was mainly because Ling Han was too young and made people jealous. Otherwise, if he looked like an 80 or 90-year-old man, it was guaranteed that the youngsters here would give him face. It couldn't be helped. Youngsters were proud and arrogant. They could accept lowering their heads to the older generation, but Ling Han was so young, even younger than the majority of the people here, which naturally made people jealous and unconvinced. Ling Han wasn't so free to force everyone to be convinced by him. He smiled and nodded, asking one person, "What fish are you catching?" "Absolute cold ice fish," that person said. Suddenly, he was startled and pulled the bamboo pole. He actually caught a white fish that was over a foot long. Its belly was lustrous and transparent, and one could clearly see the inside, which seemed to be a layer of ice. That person was overjoyed and said with a smile, "Master Ling is really blessed. I caught one the moment you came. This is also the first absolute cold ice fish I caught in 3 days." Information on absolute cold ice fish immediately appeared in Ling Han's mind. This was known as a treasure medicine among fish, a great tonic. Especially for martial artists, it could replenish chi and blood, increase origin power, and had better effects than most medicinal pills. Because this was a naturally formed thing, eating it wouldn't have any drug resistance, pill poison, and the like. One could eat as much as they wanted. At most, if one's tier was higher, they would need more absolute cold ice fish to have an obvious effect. No one went into the water to fish because the water temperature was too cold. Even if a spiritual pedestal tier warrior went into the water, it wouldn't take long for them to be frozen into an ice block. Ling Han was instantly in high spirits and said to Guang Yuan and Li Si-chan, "Let's fish too." There were almost all kinds of materials in the Black Tower. Soon Ling Han and the others each had an extra set of fishing gear. And the fishing line Ling Han used was formed from blood-sucking origin gold. He took out a large pile of ginseng from the Black Tower, which was bait. Absolute cold ice fish itself was a super tonic, so it also liked to eat spirit medicines, making it the best bait. However, how precious were spirit medicines? The people here at most took out some second-tier and third-tier spirit medicines, and the more valuable ones couldn't be taken out, and even if they did, how much could they have? It was precisely because of this that everyone's harvest was so little. If the bait wasn't good enough, why would the absolute cold ice fish take the bait? However, what Ling Han lacked the least now was spirit medicines, at least below 5th tier. He definitely didn't lack. What he took out were all 100-year-old ginseng, and the ginseng was at least 100 years old. It wasn't that there weren't any 1,000-year-old ginseng, and using this to fish would be too extravagant. Ling Han threw some ginseng to Guang Yuan and Li Si-chan, and everyone looked at this stalk of ginseng that was as thick as a child's arm being thrown around like a carrot. Their faces couldn't help but twitch. Envy, jealousy, and hatred. This was too rich, right? Ling Han used blood-sucking origin gold to entangle the ginseng, and with a casual fling, the ginseng fell far into the center of the lake, causing slight ripples. Although these people weren't arrogant to that extent, the possibility of them asking for a heaven-grade alchemist was almost zero, so why would they need to give face? The most important thing was that they were young and aggressive, and Ling Han was too young, making others jealous. They put a big hat on Ling Han and stood firm on reason first. In the future, even if Ling Han made a ruckus at their sex, they could be confident and confident. After all, in the North region, what difference was there between a heaven-grade alchemist and an earth-grade mid-level alchemist? Sex respected high-level alchemists, but definitely wouldn't listen to high-level alchemists' words. Guang Yuan's battle prowess was very strong, but he just entered the spiritual pedestal tier after all. Moreover, the breakthrough this time was to return to the spiritual pedestal tier, so he couldn't activate the benefits of the heavenly luck stone. Thus, his battle prowess was only about 4 stars. Against these elite disciples of large sects, 1 or 2 was fine, but when the numbers increased, he couldn't hold on. Under the siege of 6 people, Guang Yuan was already in imminent danger. Those who didn't cause trouble were also acting on the side. Ling Han was too young, and they actually had to bow respectfully to such a young man and call him master. They were naturally displeased and happy to watch the show. Ling Han's gaze was cold as he suddenly stood up and walked towards the battle. "Master Ling, are you going to fight personally?" a troublemaker said. He wasn't on the prodigy roll, but he was extremely conceited and didn't believe that Ling Han had once fought with 20 stars of spiritual infant-tier battle prowess, thinking that it was just someone deliberately boasting to boost Ling Han's reputation. Ling Han revealed a cold smile and said, "Since you guys aren't willing to get lost, then all of you stay here." With a shake of his right hand, the demon birth sword was already unleashed. With a slash, the troublemaker's head immediately flew up. Blood spurted wildly from the neck, rising more than 3 meters high before falling back. The head fell to the ground with an expression of disbelief on his face. He never would have thought that Ling Han would suddenly kill him. He was a disciple of the Blood Flame Valley, from the North region's most powerful sect. Anyone would think twice before making a move. This bloody massacre instantly stunned everyone. The disciples of the Blood Flame Valley were killed as he pleased, which meant that Ling Han didn't have the slightest scruple. Could a heaven-grade alchemist really be so willful? Ling Han walked towards Guang Yuan's battle. His killing intent overflowed, making the 6 troublemakers feel pressure and involuntarily retreat. However, it was already too late. Ling Han slashed out with his sword, shooting out 6 flashes of sword chi that sliced towards the 6 people. The 6 people didn't even have the slightest ability to resist and were instantly sliced in half. Severed limbs and heads were scattered everywhere, and blood was everywhere. Everyone was terrified. A large part of the reason why alchemists had a transcendent status was that they didn't participate in the conflicts of interest between martial artists, so they could be transcendent. Otherwise, with competition there would be conflict, so how could they be transcendent? There had never been any alchemists who participated in the fights for treasures, because alchemists all understood that the reason why their status was transcendent was because they isolated themselves from the fights for benefits. But Ling Han was so fearless. Not only did he enter the mystery realm, his actions were decisive and ruthless, making people tremble in fear. The 7 troublemakers were all executed. Ling Han sheathed his sword, swept a cold glance over everyone, and returned to his original spot, continuing to fish. He could act as if nothing had happened, but the others couldn't. Those 7 corpses with severed heads and arms still laid there. Who could turn a blind eye to it? Some people even began to tremble, fearing that Ling Han's murderous nature would erupt and kill them all to silence them. These people quietly left, but some people were reluctant to give up on the absolute cold ice heartfish still fishing there. Chapter 474. In just one morning, Ling Han caught more than 100 absolute cold ice heartfish, and adding on Li Xichan and Guang Yuan's harvest, the total reached more than 150, which was more than the total harvest of everyone present. As the saying goes, a worker must first sharpen his tools if he wants to do a good job. This was the principle. At noon, Ling Han started a fire and began to cook these treasure fish. 4 were roasted to eat, and the other 4 were made into soup. Ling Han also added many spirit medicines, and as it was cooking, the tempting aroma spread out, making people salivate. Moreover, this wasn't just a matter of incense. There were actually rays of light shooting up into the sky from the furnace, the scene astonishing. That was a great supplement, drawing upon the spiritual chi of heaven and earth, forming a unique scene. Everyone was envious and hurriedly cooked their own, but they didn't add spirit medicines, and the fish soup they made was only a clear soup, absolutely incomparable to Ling Han's pot. Ling Han looked at Yu Kaiyu and suddenly said, "Brother Yu, how about coming over to eat together?" Yu Kaiyu was startled, never thinking that Ling Han would actually open his mouth to invite him. After being startled for a moment, he even pointed at himself and said, "What, brother, you won't give me face?" Ling Han said with a smile, "I heard that you and brother Guang Yuan had a friendship." Yu Kaiyu naturally recognized Guang Yuan. Back then, the 3 of them entered the Thousand Corp Sex branch in Seaflow City together, and formed a friendship of battle. However, back then the other person was Han Lin, not Ling Han, so Yu Kaiyu didn't dare to come up and recognize him. After all, Ling Han was a heaven-grade alchemist. Ha ha ha, since Grandmaster Ling invited, how could I dare not give face? He strode over and sat on the ground. For people, just enough for each person to sit in a corner. Ling Han took out bowls and plates. There was exactly one grilled fish for each of them, and one bowl of fish soup. However, there was no longer any fish or spirit medicine in the fish soup. They had all been cooked until they were soft, and the essence had all been absorbed into the soup, which was snowy white. Yukayu's expression was a little strange. For grilled fish, could it be that Ling Han already had the idea of inviting him? Come, don't stand on ceremony. Ling Han grabbed a grilled fish and started eating. Li Sichan and Guang Yuan naturally wouldn't stand on ceremony. As long as they ate with Hunyo, they would naturally develop the habit of grabbing the opportunity to eat. Otherwise, there would definitely be no food to eat. This was a bloody lesson. Yukayu was a bold and unrestrained person, so he immediately threw away his politeness and started to eat with big mouthfuls. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. He immediately praised. Big fish are really different. Not only is the meat more plump, but the essence of the precious medicine is also richer. I estimate that eating a dozen of them will allow me to advance a small realm. Guang Yuan also nodded. This was a great help to him. Li Sichan, on the other hand, couldn't speak at all. Divine multicolored light continuously surged out from her delicate body. That was the precious flesh medicine that had already displayed its effects. It was currently crazily increasing her cultivation. She was about to break through again. The main reason was that her tier was too low. Even spiritual pedestal tier cultivators only needed a dozen fish to advance, so for gushing spring tier cultivators, one bite could really break through a small tier. Ling Han was very satisfied. He wanted to leave some dried fish for Ling Dongxing. As long as Ling Dongxing's spirit base recovered, his cultivation would welcome a shocking explosion. Reaching the 9th layer of the spiritual pedestal tier within 3 years was definitely not a dream. Li Sichan couldn't eat a second bite at all. She immediately sat to one side and started to adjust her breath, preparing to break through to the 4th layer of the gushing spring tier. Yukayu felt strange. Only young geniuses could enter here, and the term young was relative to age. For example, a 100-year-old spiritual infant tier cultivator was definitely considered young. However, Li Sichan was only in the gushing spring tier, and was almost 20 years old. Such a genius could be easily found anywhere. So why did she have the right to enter the mystery realm? However, as he drank the fish soup and ate the grilled fish, he quickly forgot about this. After eating, he immediately sat cross-legged and adjusted his breath to quickly refine the benefits in his body and truly be absorbed by his body. Guang Yuan was the same. He just broke through and needed the nourishment of this kind of treasured medicine. Only Ling Han was very gloomy. His spiritual pedestal's construction was really too strong. Guang Yuan and Yukayu only needed a dozen or so treasured fish to advance 1 layer, but he estimated that he needed a few hundred. Moreover, this was only the 2nd layer of the spiritual pedestal tier. After the 5th layer, 8th layer, who knew how much this number would increase? Then he'd fish more. Ling Han continued to cook the absolute cold ice heart fish. He prepared to turn himself into a glutton, fishing while eating fish. The fish here were definitely idiots. They probably hadn't been fished for over 100 years, so even though a few hundred of their companions disappeared, they still pounced forward and continued, fulfilling an old saying, men die for wealth and birds die for food. By this night, Ling Han had already fished over 300 absolute cold ice heart fish. After being slaughtered by him, he stored them in the Black Tower to ensure that the essence within wouldn't be lost. The night passed and the next day Ling Han continued to fish. However, after a day, his harvest was much less than the day before. There were only about 200 fish. He didn't know whether it was because these fish had become smarter, or because the overall number was insufficient. Another day passed and on the 3rd day, Ling Han's harvest further decreased, only 100 or so fish. Everyone shook their heads. Although this lake wasn't small, the number of absolute cold ice heart fish it could support was also limited, and that was about it. Hong Long Long, a whirlpool suddenly appeared in the center of the lake. Originally, there were already quite a few people planning to leave, but seeing this scene they couldn't help but be surprised. Was some treasure about to come into being? This wasn't impossible. A place that could grow absolute cold ice heart fish, how could it be an ordinary place? The whirlpool spun fiercely, becoming bigger and bigger. Hong, a shocking scene appeared, and a strange creature emerged from the whirlpool. It had a tiger's head, but a crocodile's body. Moreover, it had 6 legs, and a pair of eagle wings grew on its back. Its entire body was around 10 meters long. Now this monster flapped its eagle wings and flew towards the shore, spreading its wings and emitting a terrifying might. Everyone was terrified. This was a flower blossom tier beast. It was over, there were no flower blossom tier martial artists here, so how could they resist this monster? Ling Han, however, revealed a pleasantly surprised expression. The aura emitted by this great beast far surpassed that of normal flower blossom tier beasts, and wasn't the slightest bit weaker than the golden blood demonic ape in the dark devil forest. King Tiera's expected of a mystery realm. He only entered for a few days and already encountered 2 king tier beasts. One had to know that king tier beasts were equivalent to treasured medicines of the same tier, and they were the highest quality ones. Now that they appeared one after another, wouldn't it be a pleasant surprise? Moreover, the rock spirit should also be considered king tier, even more powerful than normal king tier beasts, because it was a spirit of the 5 elements, nurtured by heaven and earth. Run! It was unknown who shouted first, but everyone fled in all directions. Spiritual ocean tier and spiritual pedestal tier warriors encountered flower blossom tier warriors. What else could they do but run? That beast lightly flapped its wings and instantly cold wind howled, forming ice blades that sliced towards everyone. This was a flower blossom tier warrior's attack, and a king tier great beast at that, so its power was naturally terrifying. Shwa shwa shwa, the ice blades attacked and didn't need to hit anyone. As long as they were a bit on the side, they would be frozen into a frozen stick, and if they were directly swept, it would be even worse. They would first be frozen, then shattered into pieces, dying without a complete corpse. So powerful. Chapter 475. A Beautiful Romance. Everyone looked over and saw that in the pavilion at the center of the lake, a woman dressed in white had appeared out of nowhere. Her hair was like the clouds and her hair was like snow. She was so beautiful that she was not tainted by any worldly aura. She was playing the zither with her jade-like hands. As she gently plucked the strings, beautiful notes could be heard, intoxicating everyone. This song should not exist in this world. The fish in the lake kept jumping out of the water and gathered around the pavilion in the center of the lake. They were extremely happy. In the sky, a large number of birds flew over and danced in the sky like fairies. The sound of the zither turned into talismans and entered the lake. They caused slight ripples, but they were not destructive at all. The fish were happy and the birds were dancing. Everyone revealed an intoxicated expression. This woman and this song should only exist in the heavens, so how could they descend into the mortal realm? Fairy Yun. What? She's Fairy Yun. Truly an exquisite beauty. She's actually not the most beautiful woman in the middle state. I don't believe it. I don't believe it either. Everyone shook their heads. Wang Yiyun's appearance was above Lu Yutong's level, but was inferior to Zhu Xian'er's. Added with this breathtakingly beautiful scene in front of them, it naturally added endless charm to her. Zhu Xian'er was a little jealous. She moved closer to Ling Han's ear and said in a low voice, "Xian'er also knows how to play the flute." Ling Han looked at her bright red lips, and his heart involuntarily swayed. He said, "All right, when you're free, play it for me." Zhu Xian'er nodded, extremely gentle. "Everyone, please be friendly." Wang Yiyun pressed her hands lightly on the zither, but the lingering sound still lingered. Her voice was also gentle and beautiful, ethereal like the gurgling of spring water. Yes, everyone was convinced, and nodded in agreement. Ling Han was astounded. This girl was only 23 or 24 years old, yet had already broken through to the spiritual infant tier, which was very extraordinary. As expected of a disciple of an ancient great sect, her cultivation level far surpassed that of her peers. There was definitely no one in the North region who could compare to her, and only a few well-known figures in the other 3 regions, like Mu Rongqing and the others, would be qualified to compare to her. Our sect and the other few great sects have divined the secrets of heaven, and believe that a great calamity will occur soon. Wang Yun continued. The whole place was silent, and only her ethereal voice resounded. Close to 10,000 years ago, the calamity that caused great destruction to the vast lands will descend once again, and our sect and the other few great sects will act just like they did 10,000 years ago, joining hands to face the powerful enemy, and plow through the world. But as a precaution, we have still decided to establish the Restore Heaven Academy to preserve as much of the hope and kindling of the future as possible. So everyone here is the key to reviving martial arts in the future. So we must not harm our own people. When she finished speaking, she stood up and walked towards the shore, treading on the waves. With every step she took, fishes leaped out of the water to frolic, and skylarks flew and danced behind her. It was as if a fairy had descended into the world, so beautiful that she was pure and otherworldly. Fairy is really kind-hearted. The 5 great sects also have the world in their hearts. If a great calamity really happens, only the 5 great sects can protect the world. Great benevolence and righteousness. Great merit. Everyone was full of praise. No matter if it was sincere or not, who would dare speak ill of the 5 great ancient sects? They were super forces with shattering void tier elites overseeing them, and any one of them could proclaim themselves the ruler of the world. However, the 5 great sects had always guarded their own territory, and had never planned to proclaim themselves the ruler of the world. This couldn't help but make others raise their thumbs in praise. Wang Yun arrived, smiled sweetly at Nong Man and said, "Sister Man, don't be angry anymore, okay? For sister's sake, I obviously won't be angry." Nong Man forced out a smile. The great principle had already been said by the other party, and if she continued to pester her without letting it go, she would instead be looked down upon. Thus, being able to speak eloquently was also a kind of sharp weapon, standing on the moral high ground to criticize others, causing them to be so depressed that they could only lower their heads and say that they were convinced. "Brother Ling." Wang Yun turned her gaze over again. "I heard that you and Sister Man had a conflict because of a spirit tool. How about this? I have a level 6 treasure tool here, and I'll give it to Brother Ling in exchange for that spirit tool." Everyone revealed a shocked expression, casually taking out a level 6 spirit tool to give away. What great boldness, and it could also show the Wang family's background. Of course, if it weren't for the fact that Nong Man was the descendant of a heaven-grade alchemist, she definitely wouldn't be this generous. Nong Man immediately looked delighted. Actually, it was because she discovered the extraordinariness of that refined celestial bottle, but didn't want to cause a commotion, so she had Nong Shuiyun make a move. In the end, Ling Han appeared out of nowhere, and was even wealthier than them, so she had no choice but to invite Ling Han to the banquet, and use the atmosphere here to force him to submit. With the Wang family's pearl asking and being able to obtain a level 6 spirit tool, no matter how she thought about it, Ling Han should have agreed. After all, if he gave Wang Yun some face, it would be of great use in the future. "No need, I like that bottle very much, and have no intention of giving it to someone else." Ling Han directly refused. What a joke! That stone bowl was an imitation of the Heaven Transformation Bowl, and could refine all things and extract their essence. It was even more precious than the Demon Birth Sword, and it could be exchanged for a level 6 spirit tool. Dream on. His decisive refusal not only shocked everyone, but even Wang Yun did not expect it. Her beautiful face revealed an obvious look of astonishment, and after being dazed for a moment, she finally said, "Brother Ling, won't you reconsider?" "No need." Ling Han waved his hand, not giving her any face at all. "Ling Han, you're too arrogant." Zuoqiu Lucheng took the opportunity to shout. Ling Han refused Wang Yun's good intentions, and obviously incurred the wrath of the masses. If he added a little more fuel to the fire, he would naturally be able to turn Ling Han into a target of public criticism. Yes, too arrogant. Fairy Yun had good intentions, and you actually did not even consider it. Hung, does he really think he's some big shot? If not for Fairy Yun's sake, I really want to give him a beating. Everyone was talking at once. Beauties had a natural advantage, and the more beautiful they were, the more people would neglect the matter itself and be completely affected by their emotions, leaning one-sidedly towards Wang Yun. Ling Han smiled calmly and said, "Hunyo, are you full?" "I'm barely not hungry." Hunyo poked her little head out from the pile of food. The food here isn't tasty at all, it's been hard on you. Everyone fainted. If it wasn't tasty, then why did you eat so much? The plates piled up on the side were all taller than you, okay? Moreover, you ate so much and still barely weren't hungry. What kind of stomach did you have? Alright then, let's go back and continue eating, Ling Han said with a smile. Okay. Hunyo clapped her hands and said in a sweet voice while looking at Wang Yiyun. You're really a failure as a host, making so many disgusting dishes for your guests to eat. Sai Nyo despises you. Fine, after eating so much of her high-tier demonic beast meat, she still despised her. This little girl was really ruthless. Yet Wang Yiyun was not angered in the slightest. There was still a bright smile on her pretty face, as if nothing could sway her emotions, but the people at the side could not help but say, "Are there guests like you? Don't go, stay." That's right, I want to spar with you. That's right, fighting harms the harmony, so let's spar a bit. Cell phones read more refreshingly. Chapter 476. A nice romance. Wounded but not dead. As expected of a flower blossom tier king tier great beast, taking a spiritual infant tier attack head-on and only suffering heavy injuries, this was too shocking. Ling Han let out a long howl, brandished his sword, and charged towards the great demon. Given time, the great beast might recover somewhat, and if it escaped into the lake, then it would be even more impossible to find. This was called taking advantage of his illness to take his life. Xiao, after the two golden fists shot out this attack, they were also annihilated. After all, this was only a spiritual infant tier attack sealed in a law decree. Ling Han flew out and charged over. The great beast revealed a furious expression. It was a king tier, and a mere spiritual pedestal tier human martial artist dared to initiate an attack on it. This was looking down on it too much. If it was still in its prime, then a single ice blade would be enough to kill Ling Han. But now it was in its weakest state. It couldn't even move its wings, so how could it fire an ice blade? It obviously wasn't willing to wait helplessly for death, glaring and firing a martial art intent at Ling Han. As long as this martial art intent collided with it, it was guaranteed that this human brat would become an idiot. The great beast was extremely confident. It was a flower blossom tier king tier, and its martial art intent was too terrifying. However, it immediately revealed an extremely shocked expression because Ling Han's attack didn't slow down at all. As the long sword moved, it even fired out 10 flashes of sword chi, blasting towards its relatively weak neck. How was this possible? If it could speak human language, it definitely would have cried out in shock, but at the moment, it was so weak that it couldn't even open its mouth, and could only watch as the 10 flashes of sword chi madly slashed at it. Pew. These sword chi were all stimulated by a 10th tier spirit tool, and possessed extremely shocking destructive power. Even a king tier great beast of the flower blossom tier would not be able to withstand it with the defense of its physical body. 10 flashes of sword chi wreaked havoc, and a deep wound instantly appeared on its neck. However, this wasn't the most fatal. The demon birth sword slashed over. This was the most terrifying attack. How sharp was a 10th tier spirit tool? Even sword chi could cut open its body, let alone a direct attack from the demon birth sword. The great beast revealed an expression of fear. It absolutely did not want to die, and it definitely did not want to die in the hands of a spiritual pedestal tier human. Puff with a slash. A tiger's head instantly soared into the sky. Ling Han moved extremely quickly, grabbing the great beast's body and directly storing it into the black tower so as not to waste it. However, although he acted quickly, there was still a lot of blood splattering out. Xiao, a figure darted out, actually grabbed the flying tiger head, turned around and left. How dare you? Ling Han immediately moved and chased after that person. This person actually dared to rob him. Behind him, pieces of rubble slowly gathered together. The stone spirit was reforming. The robber was extremely fast. Otherwise, he wouldn't have dared to do such a thing. It was obvious that he had absolute confidence in his own movement technique, which was why he dared to make a move. However, he overestimated himself and underestimated Ling Han. The movement technique Ling Han used was also changed to Earth grade, called 100 Changes 1000 Illusions. Not only could it create many afterimages to confuse the opponent during battle, it was also very useful for chasing or escaping, being astonishingly fast. competing with Ling Han's movement technique. Aside from a monster like Hu Niu, who else in the same tier could? After a few leaps and falls, Ling Han caught up to that person. Back to you. That person was rather straightforward. Seeing that he couldn't escape, he directly shook his right hand and threw the tiger head far away. Obviously, he wanted to seize the opportunity to escape while Ling Han went to pick it up. Ling Han swung his left hand and shot out blood-sucking origin gold, pulling the tiger head back and storing it into the black tower. His figure didn't change in the slightest, continuing to chase after that person. His gaze was like a sword as he said darkly, "There's such a good thing." He swung his sword and slashed. "Master Ling, stealing treasures is a very normal thing. Why take it to heart?" That person wasn't weak either, swinging his saber to parry, and 7 flashes of saber chi rose. Ling Han snorted and said, "If you also participated in the killing of that great beast, then you indeed have the right to split the spoils. But you're clearly just a lowly person who stole, yet you still dare to boast shamelessly, truly a joke." Ding 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 ding, the saber and sword collided, sparks flying everywhere, and the will of martial art similarly burst forth with dazzling divine light. What kind of battle prowess did Ling Han have? After a few moves, that person's expression changed in shock, completely defeated. He hurriedly called out, "I'm Feng Jingshang, a disciple of the cold water sect. Even if you're a heaven-grade alchemist, you can't act recklessly." "Idiot!" Ling Han scolded, his sword's momentum unwavering. He was a heaven-grade alchemist, so would he be afraid of shedding all pretense of cordiality with anyone? Only the Thousand Corpse sect, a force that naturally walked in the shadows, wouldn't be afraid of a heaven-grade alchemist. Otherwise, as long as it was a normal sect, who wouldn't give face to a heaven-grade alchemist on the surface? "I'll fight you to the death." Feng Jingshang roared loudly, taking out a spirit talisman from his mustard ring, and looked like he was about to throw it out. "This is a Raging Flames Burning Heaven talisman, made by a flower blossom tier elite of my sect, and can attack with 1/10 of his battle prowess. Don't force me." Ling Han was too lazy to even scold this time, and his long sword slashed continuously. "Die!" Feng Jingshang threw out the spirit talisman, and Hong instantly, a blazing flame rose from the spirit talisman, turning into a sea of fire that burned towards Ling Han. Ling Han sensed slightly, and activated the thunder battle armor. Instantly, a barrier of lightning formed, protecting him within, and he directly charged out of the sea of fire, slashing again. "What?" Feng Jingshang revealed an expression of disbelief. That was a flower blossom tier attack, but Ling Han actually blocked it. This was too unreal. But before he could finish his second thought, the demon birth sword had already arrived, slashing from top to bottom, and his entire body was instantly cleanly sliced into 2 halves. Ling Han withdrew his sword. With his current power and fully activating the thunder battle armor, blocking a low-level flower blossom tier attack was more than enough. Everyone looked at him with fearful gazes, their gazes extremely complicated. Merely his identity as a heaven-grade alchemist meant that no one dared to openly go against him, and his own battle prowess was even more nature-defying. Being born in the same era as Ling Han was practically a great misfortune. Ling Han obviously wouldn't care how others treated him. He smiled at Yu Kaiyu and said, "Tonight there'll be king-tier beast tonic meat to eat again." Yu Kaiyu was startled. Ling Han just said again. Could it be that he'd already eaten such a great tonic before? He didn't dare to believe it, thinking that Ling Han had said something wrong. He immediately laughed loudly and said, "Wasting a spiritual infant tier law decree to kill it, I have to eat it back." Ling Han patted his shoulder and said, "You have more than one spiritual infant tier law decree on you. Don't pretend to be poor." Yu Kaiyu laughed mischievously, obviously being hit on the mark by Ling Han, and retorted, "Do you think spiritual infant tier law decrees are cheap? This paper, this ink, and a useful brush, those are all extremely precious materials. Moreover, even my great-grandfather has to recover for a month to draw a law decree." Ling Han was too lazy to pay attention to him, and stared at the lake as he said, "The chill is fading. Could it be that this extremely cold land was formed because of this great beast?" Chapter 477. With the death of the great beast, the coldness emitted by the lake clearly faded. Thinking that this great beast could shoot out ice blades, it should be a water and ice attribute beast. It was precisely its existence that affected the environment and made the lake water so cold. Hence the existence of absolute cold ice heart fish. Not good. With the death of this great beast, the lake water will warm up, and those ice heart fish will probably die. Ling Han said with some regret. Although there weren't many absolute cold ice heart fish left in the lake. Then we can't waste it. Yu Kaiyu hurriedly said. Come, we'll go catch fish in the water. Ling Han nodded and said to Li Xichan, you stay on the shore. Although the coldness was beginning to recede, it was still not something a gushing spring tier warrior could endure. It might take another day or two for the lake water's temperature to return to a normal state. Li Xichan nodded. She never flaunted her superiority in martial art. Ling Han and the others went into the lake, and some others also felt the change in the lake water's temperature, and jumped into the lake one after another, spreading out their origin power to form a shield and swimming in the water. A spiritual pedestal tier warrior could hold their breath for an hour, and with the small amount of air inside the shield, holding on for a day was definitely not a problem. Thus, everyone could explore the bottom of the lake to their heart's content, without the slightest worry of being suffocated. The lake water was still quite cold, but spiritual pedestal tier warriors could endure it. Everyone spread out, searching for absolute cold ice heart fish. Ling Han and the others also split up. Ice heart fish wasn't some powerful beast, so they didn't need to work together. A few minutes later, Ling Han had already arrived at the bottom of the lake. He saw that there were actually many damaged pavilions and pavilions here. It was as if these buildings had only sunk deep into the bottom of the lake after experiencing an earthquake. His heart moved and he swam over. After being caught by him for 3 days, there weren't many left. And now with so many people fishing in the lake, everyone could get a few. He already got 600 or 700, so he really didn't care about a few dozen. There were about 8 or 9 pavilions at the bottom of the lake. Because some of them were buried in the mud at the bottom of the lake, only their tops were exposed. Ling Han did not know if there were more buildings hidden at the bottom of the lake. With a light push of his palm, a burst of force surged and he appeared in front of a 2-story pavilion. He directly swam in through the window on the 2nd floor. This was a study, but the books on the bookshelves had long since rotted away. Only a few covers were spared, and they floated in the water. Ling Han stretched out his hand and gently grabbed it, only to see the words, Puzhou Geographical Record, written on it. Was there a place called Pu Province in the vast lands? Ling Han wasn't very sure because in the era of his last life, there was a huge difference between the names of places in the vast lands and the ones now. Who could guarantee what the names of the various places in the vast lands 20,000 years, 50,000 years ago? Perhaps there was a place called Puzhou. He grabbed another cover. On it was written, on the array paths 36 changes of heart. Ling Han was instantly tempted. Array path? What a pity there was only the cover left. Otherwise, if he could take a peek, it would be of great help to his array path. He grabbed the 3rd cover, and after his eyes swept over it, his expression changed. Notes on the refinement of clear void pill, red leaf pill, and purple-lined golden pill. This was a handbook on alchemy. It should be describing the details of concocting the clear void pill, and the other 2 types of alchemical pills. This itself wasn't much. In his last life, Ling Han would also make some notes after concocting. Firstly, it was to remind himself, and secondly, it could be used as a reference for his 2 alchemy disciples. What shocked Ling Han was the words, purple-lined golden pill. This was a godly medicine. At the end of his last life, he had entered many historical sites. Among them, there was a cave left by an ancient alchemy expert, and he had obtained some handbooks. On them, Ling Han had seen the words, purple-lined golden pill. Purple-lined golden pill. After taking one, as long as the body didn't explode and die, a mortal could ascend to the heavens in a single step and become a god. What kind of godly medicine was this? Ling Han believed that even divine-grade alchemical pills were divided into different grades. How could a normal divine-grade alchemical pill possibly allow a mortal to instantly become a god? But in the vast lands, it was impossible to concoct any kind of divine-grade alchemical pill, because there were no materials. Here 3 kinds of pills were placed side by side, and they were probably all divine-grade pills. And speaking of notes, it must have been refined, or else how could they talk about it? Divine-grade pills could be refined in the vast lands, and it was very likely to be high-level divine-grade pills. Absolutely impossible. Ling Han's hand trembled slightly, and a guess rose up in his mind. Could it be that this mystery realm was forcibly refined by a god from some region of the god realm, and then brought to the lower realm? This guess had a very high possibility of being correct, because Yin Tianzhao wanted something from the Sagittarius Palace Hall. Who was Yin Tianzhao? Although he was a mortal, he had the memories of a god, and from a certain perspective he was much more awesome than Ling Han, a reincarnated heaven-tier warrior. Could something that he had chosen be simple? It had to be a divine item. If it was said to be a part of the god realm, then it was easy to understand, and the spiritual chi environment here that was so dense that it couldn't be dissolved could also be explained. Moreover, why would there be bone patterns on the skulls of the beasts here? Because they were beasts from the god realm, that was the answer. Ling Han's heart involuntarily sped up. Could it be that he was going to obtain an inheritance from the god realm? Awesome, awesome. With this speculation, Ling Han became even more careful in his search. Any random item found here could possibly be an immortal grade treasure. But to his disappointment, the things in the room were extremely ordinary. The books were made of paper rotting, the wood wasn't some divine wood rotting, and the bricks were the same, just a bit harder. But whatever, he'd take them all. With a thought, Ling Han stored the pavilion into the Black Tower. The space was so big anyway, so he wasn't afraid of taking up space. He swam to another pavilion and stored it again, then the third was a pavilion which he also moved into the Black Tower. At this time someone also snuck over, seemingly no longer interested in the absolute cold ice heartfish, but instead staring at the sunken buildings at the bottom of the lake. It was a woman with cultivation of the 9th layer of the spiritual pedestal tier, but her age was over 30 years old, probably someone on the prodigy roll of the previous generations. She was already past the peak of her beauty, but maintained it very well. Her brows were picturesque, her cherry lips like blood, bright and threatening. And a woman at this age, compared to a 20-something-year-old girl, had a well-developed figure and flirtatious charm, like a ripe peach, plump and juicy. After arriving at Ling Han, the woman took the initiative to nod at Ling Han, which was respect for a heaven-grade alchemist. She already swam into a pavilion and began to search. Ling Han didn't care, and continued to collect the buildings here. Phone reading was more refreshing. Chapter 478. A few minutes later, the woman came out from the pavilion, and couldn't help but reveal a puzzled expression. She clearly remembered that there were several damaged pavilions nearby, but why were they all gone now? Before she could finish her thought, Ling Han had already swum over, and with a swipe of his hand, the pavilion behind her disappeared. The woman's face was full of strangeness. It turned out that those pavilions were all taken away by Ling Han. Did you pick up trash? She knew very clearly that there was not a bit of value in the pavilion, and even she didn't look at it, let alone a dignified heaven-grade alchemist. But she was immediately shocked again. A pavilion was taken away just like that. How big was your spatial ring? Ling Han, however, did not care. Even if everyone knew that his spatial ring was very large, so what? Could it be that they would still dare to snatch it? To offend a heaven-grade alchemist for a spatial spirit tool, no matter how large the spatial ring was, it was not worth it. Of course, if they knew the true use of the Black Tower, not to mention that Ling Han was only a heaven-grade alchemist, even gods would rush up to rob it. Ling Han began to excavate the underground buildings, and several only revealed their heads. 1 building, 2 buildings, 3 buildings, he was very happy to take them. Even if it was for nothing, it wouldn't waste much time, but if there were some gains, then the profit would be great. He discovered a roof and casually took it away, but found that the roof was still there, not taken into the Black Tower. He tried again, but still to no avail, which made him feel strange. Looking closely, this roof really was somewhat different. It was a pointed roof, and the entire roof was one piece without tiles and was golden. Why couldn't it be taken into the Black Tower? Ling Han waved his hands, and instantly, pieces of mud and sand rose at the bottom of the lake, As if a flood dragon came, twisting the entire bottom of the lake into a mess, becoming extremely turbid, and it was difficult to see one's fingers even if one stretched out his hand. Ling Han, on the other hand, was getting more and more surprised. At the bottom of the lake, more and more parts of the building were revealed. The golden walls were completely different from the other buildings, and they had already dug down about 30 feet, but the whole building was still not revealed. The strange thing was that the building was triangular. The lower it was, the larger the exposed area of the building. The previous point was just the tip of the cone. What was even stranger was that Ling Han had yet to find a single window. It was as if he had dug out a complete piece of metal, just that it was ridiculously large. He became more and more curious, and the woman beside him also became interested. She began to dig on the other side. The soil in the lake was soft, and these two people were both in the spiritual pedestal tier, so their strength was astonishing. Very soon they had dug 300 feet into the ground, and more of this golden building was revealed. But he still did not reach the bottom, and the building still had no windows or doors. This was strange. More and more people were attracted over, and there weren't many absolute cold ice heartfish left in the lake. Thus, after some fighting, everyone ended their fishing and turned their gazes over. It was strange that there was such a building at the bottom of the lake. Everyone made a move, digging towards the bottom of the lake. After digging down for almost 3,000 feet, they finally dug to the bottom, revealing the true appearance of this building. Divine Temple, Ling Han murmured. He had seen such a description in ancient records. In the divine realm, there was this kind of three-sided conical building, mostly used for sacrifices, but also used for other purposes. The golden divine temple was vast and majestic, and the 3,000 feet high seat was integrated into one. Ling Han didn't know if the vast lands had such a building ability, but if this was something from the divine realm, then it was a different matter. There was a door on 3 sides of the divine temple. It was 30 feet high and 15 feet wide, and the golden door was almost integrated with the wall. If it weren't for the various animal totems carved on the door, it would really be hard to discover. Ling Han stood in front of the door on one side. Guangyuan and Yukayu had already come over, similarly extremely curious. There were many animals on the door that Ling Han hadn't seen at all. Living beings from the divine realm? And on the other side, someone couldn't help but reach out to push the door. Hong long long, instantly the 3 doors opened at the same time, revealing 3 dark passageways. The lake water instantly flowed backwards, gushing into the divine temple. The divine temple seemed to become a sky-swallowing giant whale, emitting a powerful suction force. A few people didn't guard against it and were immediately sucked into the temple, while most people hurriedly pushed the water flow, rising towards the surface of the lake. The suction force was shocking, and after a mere 10 minutes, the entire lake had completely disappeared, turning into a giant pit. A divine temple stood there, emitting a dazzling golden light as if made of pure gold. Although martial artists viewed gold and silver as dirt, such a large pile of dirt standing in front of them was still shocking. When all the lake water disappeared, the divine temple no longer produced suction force, and just stood there quietly like a monument, causing people to instinctively feel reverence from the bottom of their hearts. Everyone cried out in shock. Who would have thought that such a grand and strange building was hidden at the bottom of the lake? Ling Han, however, was very careful. Previously, a few people had been sucked into the divine temple along with the lake water, but now they didn't appear. What did this mean? Firstly, that it was extremely dangerous inside. They were trapped and even dead. Secondly, there were many secret treasures in the divine temple, so those few people were in the process of collecting them, and had no intention of coming out. Which was it? Ling Han's curiosity was burning endlessly, and he decided to go in and investigate. This wasn't just one person's idea. Some people had already begun to form cliques wanting to enter as a group. It could be extremely dangerous inside. And if there were secret treasures, their chances of success would be higher if they teamed up. And it was during this time that more people rushed over from afar, and the number of people increased again. Are you guys going in or not? Ling Han asked Yukayu and Guangyuan. Li Sichan also walked over. Of course we're going in, Yukayu said hurriedly. If young Master Han wants to enter, Then I'll definitely follow, Guang Yuan said. All right, let's go in, Ling Han said with a smile. He had the Black Tower so he could protect everyone's lives no matter what. Let's go. The four of them set out and climbed down the walls of the lake. This was a height of 3,000 meters, and the water below had long since dried up, revealing the eerie white rocks. If they directly jumped down, the possibility of falling into pieces was the highest. Li Sichan was only in the gushing spring tier, so she climbed very slowly. Ling Han simply picked her up by the waist and climbed with only one hand, yet he was more nimble than Yu Kai-yu and Guang Yuan combined, heading towards the bottom of the lake at an incredible speed. Now this large lake was completely an abyss. This was a cliff, but a wet cliff, and it was mainly made of mud. With a little carelessness one could slip and fall down. It was only a matter of a few minutes, and Ling Han was the first to arrive at the bottom of the lake. He put Li Sichan down. This beauty's cheeks were already flushed, and her beautiful eyes were like spring water, tender and alluring. Chapter 479. Everyone could not believe it. 81 spiritual infant tier warriors were enough to overturn rivers and seas, but Ling Han merely drew out a treasured sword. Yet the figures of those warriors trembled as if they were about to be annihilated. This was a crushing defeat in terms of quality. Level 8 or even level 9 spirit tool. Someone said in a trembling voice. Spirit tools were not simple weapons, but treasured weapons that possessed supreme might on the basis of being forged from level 7 rare metal, and then nourished with martial intent. The might of such spirit tools was astonishing, and even in the hands of flower blossom tier warriors, they would have the might of the spiritual infant tier. For example, Wang Yiyan's zither was definitely a level 7 spirit tool, which was why it could unleash the might of 81 spiritual infant tier warriors. Though it was not a physical body, its battle prowess was not inferior, and there was no fear of injury or death. And the higher the level of a spirit tool, the more difficult it was to refine it. That was because there were only so many elites in the world, and nourishing a spirit tool would take at least a few dozen years. As time passed, the martial intent would also be worn away. Unless it formed a tool spirit, then it would be able to absorb the energy of heaven and earth on its own and maintain its martial intent, which would wither away along with the body of the spirit tool. Thus, the two of them revealed their high-level spirit tools, which was naturally shocking to everyone. This was the embodiment of a party's background. Otherwise, even if you possessed level 7 or level 8 rare metal, so what? You could only forge a weapon of this level, but did not have the might of a spirit tool. Wang Yiyan's expression finally showed an obvious change. The demon birth sword gave her a huge pressure, causing her to no longer be so confident. A spiritual infant tier warrior could not defeat a flower blossom tier warrior? She felt indignant. Though when a genius reached the peak stage of the flower blossom tier, they could indeed defeat some low-level, or even middle-level spiritual infant tier cultivators, and though she was only in the second layer of the spiritual infant tier, her battle prowess was as high as 10 stars. No matter what, she had the absolute upper hand. She definitely could not be intimidated by the other party. Wang Yiyun stroked the zither even more urgently, and the tune turned into a powerful army. The 81 spiritual infant tier warriors' divine might instantly reignited, as if they had been injected with stimulants, and charged towards Ling Han. Meanwhile, Ling Han revealed a faint smile. As his comprehension of the sword increased, he finally managed to open up another pattern on the demon birth sword, increasing the might of this level 10 spirit tool by another level. What kind of concept was a level 10 spirit tool? When fully activated, it was equivalent to a shattering void tier elite. He brandished the sword and Hong 29 flashes of sword chi condensed into a false ray. With a PU, it slashed onto a spiritual infant tier warrior. The warrior hurriedly used his battle spear to block, but this false ray was unleashed by a level 10 spirit tool, and its destructive power was even more terrifying than a true ray. The warrior was split in two along with his weapon. With a single strike, he killed a spiritual infant tier warrior. Hiss! Everyone drew in a cold breath, feeling that Ling Han was so strong that it was a bit hair-raising. If Ling Han was a nature-defying monster like Yao Huiyu or Small Saber King, then everyone could accept it. After all, these guys had already advanced into the spiritual infant tier, and with their battle prowess they would naturally be able to sweep away all opponents in the same tier. The problem was, Ling Han was still only in the Flower Blossom tier. Ling Han did not stop brandishing his sword. Each strike was one, and there was definitely no one who could withstand 2 strikes. With 81 consecutive strikes, those 81 warriors were also completely cut in half. Theoretically speaking, they did not have a physical body, so they naturally did not have any vital points to speak of. If they were cut in half, they could completely reattach and continue to battle. But the sword ray that the demon birth sword shot out naturally carried the might of a level 10 spirit tool, so how could they be reattached? Naturally, they could only be destroyed. Wah! Wang Yiyun violently spat out a mouthful of blood. Her beautiful eyes filled with shock. She had long since refined this treasured zither, and now that 81 warriors had been cut in half, she was also affected. Her heart was burning, and she felt incredibly uncomfortable. She was unwilling to give up, and lightly patted the treasured zither. Wang, a sharp sword actually shot out from the zither. This sword was extremely thin, and the blade was like a zither string. If one did not look carefully, they would not be able to find it at all. Wang Yiyun raised her sword and slashed out. The body of the sword that was like a zither string actually turned into strands that shot out to entangle Ling Han. Furthermore, there was no end to these strands, just like the blood-sucking origin gold, which could be pulled up endlessly. But this sword was definitely not forged from the blood-sucking origin gold. It was the sword chi and origin power that she had shot out, and through a strange method, they had fused together and shot out to entangle Ling Han. It was as if she had spread out a heavenly net. The ultimate technique of the Wang clan. Falling shadow entangling silk sword technique. All those years ago, the ultimate technique that the ancestor of the Wang clan used to dominate the world. Who would have thought that Wang Yiyun had actually learned it? As expected of a genius. Fairy Wang, kill this brat. Everyone exclaimed in shock, and even more people began to cheer for Wang Yiyun. They naturally hoped that this fairy would be able to win. Somewhat interesting, Ling Han mumbled. With a shake of his right hand, the demon birth sword shot out a sharp flash of sword chi, easily slashing apart the sword silks in the surroundings. As long as the gap in power was not too great, a level 10 spirit tool would naturally have an overwhelming advantage. Wang Yiyun's figure flew, her white robes fluttering in the wind as if she was a fairy dancing in the moonlight. However, every strike of her sword sent out a sharp flash of sword chi that sliced towards Ling Han in various arcs. It was incredibly strange. Ling Han channeled the thunderclap 9th heaven, and his battle prowess skyrocketed, reaching 15 stars of the spiritual infant tier. He charged towards Wang Yiyun. Ding 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 ding. The two swords continued to clash against each other. Sword chi flew in all directions, releasing an astonishing light. Even flower blossom tier cultivators did not dare to stare at it for fear that they would be blinded. Wang Yiyun paled in shock. After every clash, her body would feel numb, as if she had been electrocuted. It was so uncomfortable that she almost spat out blood. Even her origin power had dispersed, and she was unable to unleash her full power. In a head-on clash, she was actually inferior to a flower blossom tier cultivator. It could only be said that the thunderclap 9th heaven was too domineering. Even a super genius like Wang Yiyun was severely restricted. Ling Han suppressed Wang Yiyun, and after only a few dozen moves, the long sword in her hand had already flown out of her hand. Wang Yiyun gritted her teeth, pulled out her hairpin, and tossed it into the air. Instantly, there was a sparkling and translucent light that rapidly enlarged. It was about 3 meters long and looked like a strange skiff. Ling Han frowned and said, "If you continue to pester me, I'll spank your bottom." Wang Yiyun was both embarrassed and enraged. How could she be willing to listen? She continued to activate the hairpin, and origin power gathered at the tip of the hairpin, forming a ball of light that exuded a frightening aura, as if it could destroy the heavens and earth. Disobedient. Lightning flickered on Ling Han's body. He still could not turn into lightning, but his speed had soared by 3 times. In a flash, he had already appeared on top of Wang Yiyun, and the demon birth sword swept out, whipping towards Wang Yiyun's bottom. "Ah!" Wang Yiyun exclaimed in shock. On one side she was in pain and on the other side she was embarrassed. This man actually really dared to whip her bottom. Xiao, but she was a prodigy of the current generation. Even in this kind of situation, she still activated the hairpin and launched an attack at Ling Han. A flash of light shot out, its destructive power incredibly frightening. Ling Han slashed out with his full strength and extinguished this flash of light. However, he felt his right hand go numb, and he almost could not raise it anymore. He couldn't help but be surprised. One had to know how astonishing his physique was, but he actually felt so uncomfortable after taking a blow. This hairpin was really not simple. Pa pa pa, he fiercely whipped Wang Yun. Chapter 480. Ling Han attacked with his sword. The demon birth sword sent out 10 flashes of sword chi, which didn't need to touch these bugs at all. The powerful destructive power could shatter them 2 to 3 feet away. And with the strange fire burning, the destructive power was even more terrifying. In just a minute or two, the blood-sucking bugs killed by Ling Han numbered in the tens of thousands, but these bugs seemed to be endless as more and more blood-sucking bugs flew up from the ground. Ling Han was very shocked. The area around here was filled with these blood-sucking bugs, and the total number was probably in the hundreds of millions, right? His physique was indeed tough, but if he was continuously pierced by hundreds of millions of blood-sucking bugs, even his iron sheet body that was comparable to rare metal of the same tier would probably be bitten through. This was a blood-sucking bug nest, and it was at the entrance to the second floor. What a coincidence, it didn't let people pass at all. Retreat. Ling Han hesitated slightly. There was obviously no future in this battle to the death. These blood-sucking bugs' individual battle prowess was only comparable to the 9th layer of the spiritual ocean tier, and there were very few spiritual pedestal tier existences, but added together, any spiritual pedestal tier elite would tremble. He decided to retreat first. This wasn't his matter alone, so there was obviously no need to fight to the death alone. Unfortunately, inside the Black Tower, the massive golem was still slowly recovering, receiving a spiritual infant tier law decrees attack. Even if it had powerful recovery power, it couldn't recover in a short time. With his battle prowess, it was somewhat difficult to exterminate the blood-sucking bugs here, but charging out was a piece of cake. He cut through the swarm of bugs and passed through the entrance. His vision suddenly darkened, and he already appeared in the space of the first floor, which was incomparably dark. "He's out," everyone exclaimed. How is it? What's inside?" Everyone asked at the same time. Ling Han ignored them. Hey, Master Ling. Aren't you going to share the information you found out with everyone?" Someone rebuked. "That's right. Everyone's fighting side by side now. Not to mention that you're hiding the situation. You're too petty, not having the bearing of a master at all." "I was wrong." Ling Han smirked coldly. These people dared to reprimand him because his cultivation level was not high, and he did not have any elites by his side. Otherwise, even if he was an Earth-grade middle-level alchemist, there would be no lack of Flower Blossom tier elites by his side. Which junior would dare to be impudent in front of him? He scanned the crowd and said, "If you want to know, go in yourself." Everyone was enraged. They felt that Ling Han was too stingy. He had already gone in, so why didn't he share the information with them? Moreover, Ling Han's wretched appearance when he ran out just now was clearly filled with danger. Naturally, they wanted to know what kind of environment it was inside and what they had to face. Only after they were prepared would they enter. "Master Ling, you've gone too far. We are in the same boat. You shouldn't be so selfish." Everyone continued to criticize, still wanting to use public anger to force Ling Han to submit. Idiot, Ling Han originally wanted to warn everyone, but now he changed his mind. Whether these people lived or died, it had nothing to do with him. He walked to the side of Li Si-chan and the others, and said in a low voice, "The second layer is a vast special space with terrifying blood-sucking bugs. Those people before died because the blood-sucking bugs sucked all their blood dry." There was no need for Ling Han to say how intense the battle with the blood-sucking bugs was. Just by looking at the 6 dried corpses, one would know that those blood-sucking bugs were absolutely terrifying. The 3 of them revealed shocked expressions. Li Si-chan and Guang Yuan were fine. They knew that Ling Han had the Black Tower, and at worst they could just hide inside, but Yukayu really frowned. Then what do we do? Yukayu asked. Ling Han smiled and said, wait. Once the rock spirit recovered, the flower blossom tear would be so powerful that it could easily suppress the bug nest. Strangely, he ran out, but the blood-sucking bugs didn't chase after him, as if they couldn't pass through the door. The others here were all elites and geniuses of various sects, definitely carrying powerful destructive treasures like spirit talismans and law decrees, perfect for them to use up. Ling Han didn't say a word, and the others couldn't do anything about him. Who could force a heaven-grade alchemist to speak? At this time, more and more people entered the divine temple, gathering one by one. Many flower blossom tear cultivators in their prime entered the mystery realm, but didn't appear nearby, so there were only spiritual pedestal tear cultivators here. Spiritual ocean tear cultivators were relatively few, and gushing spring tear only had Li Si-chan. The truth was that if one's strength was too low, they couldn't snatch treasures even if they discovered them. They could only use the environment here to cultivate, and when they left they could at least advance 1 or 2 tiers. Let's go, since someone entered and came out alive, why can't we? Someone began to link up various people, wanting to charge into the second layer. That's right, we're all in the spiritual pedestal tier. If he can go, so can I, let's go. These people were all young and impetuous. On the surface, they didn't dare to fall out with Ling Han, but none of them were convinced, clamoring one after another. Finally, a team of over 100 people formed, wanting to charge into the second layer. They weren't stupid. The vanguard was a tall and sturdy man who specialized in earth element arts, and his physique was extremely tough. On top of that, someone lent him a defensive spirit tool, so even if there was a flower blossom tear cultivator lying in ambush, he could take a hit and not die. These people charged in, not making the slightest sound anymore. The entrance was isolated from a world, and neither light nor sound could pass through. After a while, Ling Han's consciousness entered the Black Tower. Seeing that the rock spirit had finished reassembling and recovered its vitality, he cracked a smile and said, let's go, we should also enter. Si-chan, you stay outside. Taking advantage of Yukayu turning around, he directly stored Li Si-chan into the Black Tower. Where's Lady Li? Yukayu turned around, and when Li Si-chan was gone, his face was instantly filled with shock. She went out, Ling Han said casually. So fast? Yukayu exclaimed. How was it possible? It was only the time it took to turn around. And Ling Han nodded. Guang Yuan laughed muffled. Ling Han took the lead, and the three of them walked up the steps one after another, entering the second layer. Instantly, a great battle between humans and insects appeared in front of them. Countless blood-sucking insects danced in the sky, attacking the human martial artists. The insect corpses on the ground actually piled up into a thick layer, and on the human side more than 20 people died, all sucked dry. As more and more blood-sucking insects died, the insects in the entire area also began to riot. Within a radius of a few miles, all the blood-sucking insects flew up and circled in the sky, turning into a tornado that swept towards everyone. This was a completely different battle style. Previously, the blood-sucking insects relied on the advantage of numbers and attacked from all angles, but in essence they were still doing things their own way, and couldn't be said to cooperate. But now it was completely different. Hundreds of millions of blood-sucking insects turned into one body, sweeping towards everyone. Oh! Thus, after confirming that the Bug King was dead, everyone didn't take another look. They all looked at Ling Han. That sword strike just now made their hearts tremble. The Bug King flew so high, but Ling Han's sword chi still hurt it. Although it was the most fragile wing, it was still shocking. Ling Han walked to the Bug King's side and used his sword to cut open the Bug King's corpse. This beast didn't have bones at all, so it naturally wouldn't have bone patterns, and there were no similar things on its wings and outer shell. As expected, this wasn't King tier, so there were no bone patterns. Everyone was already on their way. Everyone was very interested in this place, wanting to explore it to the end. This place was very strange. They clearly came up from the middle of the first floor, but now there was a golden wall on one side, as if they came to the side of a divine temple. However, such a large space was unreasonable in the first place, so it wouldn't be strange if it was more strange. Because there was only one direction that they could take, Ling Han and his two companions followed behind the others, heading forwards. After walking for about 20 minutes, a building suddenly appeared in front of them. Its shape was exactly the same as the Golden Temple outside, but it was much smaller. It was only about 10 feet tall and was completely black. In addition, there was only one side that could be entered. Everyone stopped in their tracks. Now that they had suddenly discovered a building, they naturally had the urge to enter it. However, this place was quite strange. Everyone was worried that there was some danger inside, and no one was willing to stand out and be the first to enter. Wung wung wung, a strange sound was heard. Ling Han's expression changed and he said, "Not good, there are blood-sucking bugs here." Just as he finished speaking, a black cloud flew out of the temple and engulfed everyone like it covered the sky and earth. Not good. Everyone cried out in alarm. When facing the first wave of bugs, they had already used up all their trump cards, but now there was another wave. What should they do? The bug swarm was already attacking, and everyone hurriedly acted. They couldn't just sit and wait for death. In just a short while, everyone retreated. This bug swarm was even more numerous than the previous one, and everyone's strength had decreased. Naturally, they could only fight and retreat. Come, let's enter the temple. Ling Han decided to advance instead of retreating. In this relatively narrow space, it could actually weaken the bug swarm's advantage in numbers. The three of them entered the Black Temple. There was only one floor and it was very empty. In the middle there was a stone platform and on the stone was a corpse. Now there were only piles of white bones left. This was an offering for sacrifice. Then what was with the bug swarm? "Master Ling, don't just stand there." Yu shouted. He was in the middle of a fierce battle with Guang Yuan, but Ling Han was actually so focused on the corpse that it immediately increased the pressure on them. "Bloody battles can improve your strength," Ling Han said with a smile, and strode over to the side of the human remains. However, he had not even come close when he felt an indescribable pressure, as if it was about to shatter his body. So terrifying. Ling Han revealed a shocked expression. This corpse definitely wasn't simple when it was alive, and it had to be at least a shattering void tier existence to make his divine sense feel like it was being cut by a sword. It could even be a god tier existence. Chapter 482. This was a set of God's bones. Although it was unknown how many years had passed, the divinity still remained. Moreover, this definitely wasn't a normal human's remains. There was a horn on the forehead. Obviously, that horn was broken off, leaving only a small part on his forehead. Additionally, his leg bones and arms also had bone wings, which were also broken off. Chu Hao could imagine that when this god was alive, there were extremely sharp bone blades piercing out of his arms and legs. This isn't human, could it be a beast that took human form? Ling Han's heart pounded. He'd read ancient records that said that if a beast crossed into god tier, it could shed its beast body and take human form. Now, some humans had the bloodline of a great ancient beast, such as Feng Yan, which was very likely a descendant of a human and a beast that became god, thus inheriting a shred of beast's bloodline. No matter what, this was a set of treasured bones without another word. Ling Han was about to put the remains into the Black Tower, but he immediately discovered that he couldn't do as he wished. What was going on? Couldn't a god tier item be put into the Black Tower? No. He immediately discovered that a fist-sized blood-sucking bug flew out from the remains and stared at him, emitting a shocking chill. A flower blossom tier being his. Ling Han suddenly understood. Could it be that these blood-sucking bugs were born from the corpses of gods? That's why they didn't fear the pressure of gods after death, and didn't have to worry about starving to death without food? They usually resided in the remains of gods and absorbed their aura. Damn, what kind of damn place was this, sacrificing gods, mommy? Yu screamed in fear. They were trying their best to block the blood-sucking bugs from outside, and relying on the narrow passageway, they could barely hold on. But Ling Han actually provoked another bug king, and it was even a flower blossom tier being. Don't be nervous, you guys continue to deal with the small ones, leave the big ones to me. Ling Han smiled and raised his right hand, summoning the rock spirit. At this time, the rock spirit had already completely recovered. The earth was thick, and the rock spirit that was born from it also inherited this advantage. Its defensive power was astonishing, and so was its recovery ability. As long as it wasn't killed on the spot, it would quickly recover. The rock spirit roared at the insect king as soon as it appeared. Its sound waves were like blades. The bug king was small, but the strength of the flower blossom tear was there for all to see, so it was completely unafraid. With a flap of its wings, wong wong wong, it stirred up 2 whirlwinds that welcomed the sound waves. Poo piu piu piu, the whirlwinds collided with the sound waves, setting off a shock wave. The rock spirit's sound wave clearly had the upper hand. Although it was slightly weakened, it still shattered the 2 whirlwinds and continued to attack the Worm King. Ling Han nodded to himself. The rock spirit was not a demonic beast, but a mysterious object born from the heavens and earth. However, in terms of ranking, it was not only the king of demonic beasts but also the king of kings. Just like how one could be called a king among swords by cultivating 7 flashes of sword chi and 10 flashes of sword chi, could 2 kings be the same? The Worm King flapped its wings at a shocking speed, charging towards the rock spirit, obviously taking advantage of its clumsiness. The rock spirit's movements certainly weren't as fast as the Worm King. Only when the Worm King's mouthpart pierced into its heart did it slap over. The Worm King already started sucking blood. As long as it sucked clean the opponent's blood, no matter how strong the opponent was, it would only be a dried corpse. However, when it sucked, it realized, damn, where did the blood come from? The rock spirit slap arrived. Its speed wasn't ridiculously fast, but when it attacked and moved to high speed, it was similarly ridiculously fast. It was already too late for the Worm King to flap its wings to leave, and it was instantly slapped solidly. This was no different from hitting a mosquito. The rock spirit released its hand, and the Worm King instantly fell, but it only fell halfway before flying up again, staring at the rock spirit with hatred and confusion. Couldn't suck blood, so could it already be a dried corpse? But how could a dried corpse still be so lively? Limited by the environment it grew in, even if this Worm King advanced into the flower blossom tier, it still had limited knowledge and intelligence, so it was instantly dumbfounded. It was dumbfounded, but the rock spirit wouldn't be dumbfounded. It roared loudly, and 36 hairs grew out of its head. The power of heaven and earth was activated, and instantly blazing white lightning flickered, striking out along with its punch. Tiandu Thunderstar formation. Unfortunately, this was only a 5th tier formation, and wasn't very effective against a flower blossom tier Worm King. However, against normal little blood-sucking bugs, its destructive power was too great. Come here! Ling Han shouted. Yu Kai Yu and Guang Yuan hurriedly ran over, and when a large amount of blood-sucking bugs surged in, they were all bombarded by the power of lightning, instantly turning into ashes. This was activated by the formation, borrowing the power of heaven and earth. It didn't need the rock spirit to actively activate it. It only needed to control the lightning to prevent it from blasting towards Ling Han and the others. The Worm King was furious, and let out an ear-piercing screech. Immediately, countless blood-sucking bugs gathered together with it as the center, forming a black hurricane. It wanted to gather the power of the swarm, turning it into a whole. With it as the core, it adjusted in the middle, turning the power of the entire swarm into a whole and blasting it out. However, a problem immediately appeared. This black temple was only 30 meters tall, and for the rock spirit's 10 meters tall body, this height was just enough to unleash, but for the swarm it was too narrow. The rock spirit took the opportunity to attack. The power of lightning exploded, which had a powerful restraining effect on evil beings. That hurricane was continuously weakened, and the power of the rock spirit's punch wasn't affected in the slightest, continuing to blast towards the Worm King in the core. Pong! The punch landed and the entire swarm immediately collapsed. The Worm King flew out and let out a strange cry, appearing extremely furious. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, Xiaohua, come out and help too. Hong! A flame flew out and transformed into the shape of a small dog, running around Ling Han's feet. The corner of Ling Han's mouth twitched involuntarily. He summoned the strange fire to help the rock spirit fight shoulder to shoulder. Not for this guy to act cute like a small dog. Go! He kicked out, and the strange fire that transformed into a small dog was kicked towards the swarm. A large swarm of blood-sucking bugs really thought the strange fire was food, pouncing over one after another. However, the strange fire shed its cute mask at this time, turning into a terrifying existence that could burn the heavens and destroy the earth. Hong, the flame swept past, and instantly, a large swarm of bugs were burned to ashes. The strange fire now could even help Ling Han concoct heaven-grade medicinal pills, which could at least rival the flower blossom tier. Moreover, the flame could be said to be the natural nemesis of the swarm. With Xiaohua's display of might, the entire swarm seemed to have encountered their natural enemy, hurriedly distancing themselves from Xiaohua. Even the Worm King revealed a look of fear. All things were related by nature, and strange fire was an absolute restraint on blood-sucking bugs. If that Worm King wanted to fight against Xiaohua, then it had to be at least 5 or 6 small tiers higher in tier. Moreover, there was another spirit of the 5 elements here. Phone reading was more refreshing. Chapter 483. Yao Huiyu felt incredibly pained. His Zhu Xian'er actually looked like this? When they were in the north region, Zhu Xian'er's figure and the temperament she exuded were enough to intoxicate him, and he willingly prostrated himself at her feet. But now that he had really seen her face, it was as if a knife had cut into his heart. This contrast was too great. His first love had turned into a bubble just like that. Ling Han laughed loudly, put his arm around Yao Huiyu's shoulder, and said, "Little Yao, whether we fight to the death tomorrow, that's a matter for tomorrow. Thank you for today. Come, let's drink, and we won't go home until we're drunk." A person with such self-control as Yao Huiyu was naturally unwilling to get drunk, but now, he only wanted to get drunk to resolve all his grievances. He sat down without a word, and did not refuse anything that came his way. He poured himself cup after cup of wine, and very soon, he collapsed onto the ground with a paw, and fell into a deep sleep. "Your tolerance for alcohol is really poor," the Rain Emperor said with a smile. Meanwhile, Ling Han said meaningfully, "When alcohol enters one's mind, it is easier to get drunk." When Yao Huiyu woke up the next day, he discovered that he was all alone lying on a rock. The moment he crawled up, he felt a swelling pain in his head. The after effects of his hangover had acted up. He held his head, thinking that he definitely would not get drunk again in the future. He raised his head towards the sky, and could not help but reveal a self-mocking smile. Previously, he had been at her beck and call, ingratiating himself with Zhu Xian'er. Had he really fallen in love with her? He had not even seen her face before, so how could he possibly develop true feelings for her? However, his feelings had been deceiving him, and he had imagined her to be an exceptional beauty, which was why he had fallen in love with her. And now his dream had been shattered. From now on, he could put all his thoughts on martial arts. Yao Huiyu's thoughts were clear, and an expression of wild joy instantly appeared on his face. That was because he had come into contact with the barrier of 30 flashes of sword qi. True enough, the violent fluctuation of emotions had a very great impact on one's control over qi. Previously, he had cultivated bitterly, but had not been able to grasp the gist of it. "I want to become the number one in the younger generation," he declared with lofty sentiments, completely forgetting about his disappointment in love. The most talented person would naturally have supreme self-control. Ling Han waited for another 5 days, and Ken Yi had yet to see that disciple of the Heaven Sword sect. However, there was news that an earthquake had occurred at the Great Bright Mountains, and it was as if an incredible treasure had been born. Lightning soared into the skies, illuminating the starry sky. Because of this, a great many people had already set out on their way, rushing towards the Great Bright Mountains. Anyways, it was also within the Flying Flower County, and it would only take them 1 or 2 days to get there. In order to wait for Ken Yi, Ling Han could only restrain himself. Moreover, the flickering of lightning did not mean that a precious treasure had really been born. Previously, when he had guided lightning into his body and cultivated the thunderclap 9th heaven, hadn't he also guided lightning to bombard him for a whole day and night? Perhaps this was a person who cultivated a lightning element cultivation technique that was taking a crucial step. Ling Han waited patiently, but the Rain Emperor and Mu Rongqing had already set out on their way. They said that if there really was any lightning element treasure there, they would definitely bring it back for Ling Han so that he could truly form a body of lightning. The two brothers were very sincere, so Ling Han could not say no, and could only let them leave. However, Ling Han really did want to form a body of lightning. Now, he was only borrowing the power of lightning to speed up his body, but if he could transform his body into lightning, then his speed could be increased by another level, and he would be able to keep up with Hunyo. The Great Bright Mountains. Isn't that one of the 21 mountain ranges that are suspected to be the Boundless Mountains? Zhu Xian'er asked Ling Han after finding out. Ling Han nodded and said, "It can't be such a coincidence, right? The Clear Harmony Palace Hall is really there. It was not impossible because Zishuexian cultivated the power of lightning, and the Great Bright Mountains just so happened to have lightning soaring into the sky, so it was really too much of a coincidence. Let's wait for another day. If there is still no news from Qin Yi, then we'll set out." Ling Han decided to go. However, that very night, Qin Yi came over and brought with him a piece of bad news. That Heaven Sword sect's true disciple actually did not manage to bring back the ancient map. He said that the sect was extremely strict in controlling the map and treated it like the best kind of martial arts technique, and would definitely not allow outsiders to see it. Putting aside the fact that outsiders could not see it, even if the people of their own sect wanted to see it, they would have to reach a certain cultivation level such as the Heaven Tier, or an outstanding disciple like Yao Huiyu. Fuck Ling Han could not help but swear. It was only a map, so was it really that valuable? It should be impossible for the Heaven Sword sect to be afraid that they would discover some secret left behind by Zishuexian. How would they know that Zishuexian had left behind any last words? Moreover, so many years had already passed. Perhaps this place had already been buried forever underground, or perhaps it had been completely destroyed. These 5 great sects were not normal. Ling Han did not hesitate any longer. Bringing Zhu Xian'er and Hunyo with him, he rushed towards the Great Bright Mountains. Rabbit naturally accompanied him. All day long, it held 1,000-year-old ginseng in its mouth and ate it like a carrot, and even boasted shamelessly that this was interest. When Ling Han returned 2 dragon blood tyrant ginseng to it, then he would not have to pay it interest. The consequence of such a cheap mouth was naturally being bitten by Hunyo, causing it to wail out in pain. However, it did not dare to do so again and again. How could the word cheap describe it? They chatted and laughed along the way, and very soon, they arrived at the Great Bright Mountains. Flying Blossom County was not the largest county in the Middle State, but it was definitely the county with the most mountain ranges. This Great Bright Mountains was also a large mountain range that stretched for several hundred miles, and was astonishingly large. This place was filled with a primitive atmosphere, and terrifying demonic beasts ran amok. Ordinary people would not dare to enter too deeply, as one careless mistake would cost them their lives. Ling Han gazed into the distance. The trees here were all as tall as treasured swords, and the average height was more than 300 meters. They stood upright, and there were very few branches. Just looking at them gave one a kind of somber feeling. And on the east side of the mountain range, there was indeed a ball of lightning that soared into the skies. It surged and surged, spreading throughout the entire mountain peak. "Let's go." Ling Han and the others flew in that direction. Now that even Zhu Xian'er had broken through to the Flower Blossom tier, the power of their team could be said to be considerably strong. Very soon they arrived at the foot of the mountain peak. They saw that from time to time, lightning would rush out from the mountainside. This was the source of the lightning in this place, and it affected the entire mountaintop, making people not dare to approach. Ling Han revealed a shocked expression, and blurted out, "Heaven Cloud Purple Thunder." "Brat, you actually know about Heaven Cloud Purple Thunder as well?" Rabbit said in surprise, appearing to be very strange. "This is one of the 10 great ultimate thunders of ancient times." "What 10 great ultimate thunders?" Zhu Xian'er asked curiously. Rabbit went crazy when there was a visitor, and with someone supporting it, it instantly had the urge to show off. However, it was unexpectedly glared at fiercely by Hunyo. In the end, it rubbed the wounds that had not yet healed on its buttocks, not daring to act cheap anymore. It said, "The heaven and earth have spirits. Even this mountain, this water, this stone, this fire, all have the possibility of developing intelligence and forming a special life form. Oh, then isn't that the spirit of fire spirit, the spirit of rock, and the spirit of water? Zhu Xian'er came to a realization, and suddenly clapped her hands, saying, "Could it be that there is a spirit of thunder here?" Ling Han nodded and said, "It should be so, and it's an impressive guy." You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.